Story 1. My brother forged documents claiming he owned 50% of my company. When I found out, I decided to destroy him with evidence he couldn't escape. I, 35, own a profitable chain of fitness clubs in North Texas. There are 4 locations now, with 2 more planned for next year. We generate roughly $1.22 million in sales each year, and I employ approximately 50 individuals, including trainers, front desk staff, maintenance crews, and administrative professionals. Not bad for a guy who started with nothing but a GI Bill and ambition after leaving the Marine Corps at the age of 23. However, this is not a story about my business success or how I built my empire from nothing. It's about how my poisonous, dysfunctional family tried to drain me dry for years, and what occurred when I eventually resolved to fully destroy them, rather than simply walking away as a decent person would do. Growing up in suburban Dallas, my family dynamic was quite evident from the start. We had 2 children in our household, me and my younger brother, Xander. He's 32 now. Xander was always the golden boy who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, whereas I was forever presented as the responsible one who never required attention, assistance, or acknowledgement. You are familiar with this type of family arrangement. Xander was applauded heartily for properly tying his shoes, whereas I had to earn everything via blood, sweat, tears, and flawless behavior. When I was 17, a senior in high school, I worked 2 part-time jobs after school every day to accumulate enough money for a quality used automobile. I worked in a small grocery store bagging goods and collecting shopping carts. I also worked weekends for a landscaping company performing manual labor in the Texas heat. Meanwhile, Xander was caught for shoplifting video games from the local mall. Instead of suffering any serious penalties for his criminal activity, my parents purchased a brand new Honda Civic to boost his confidence and self-esteem. When I asked where my car was after 8 months of saving every penny I earned, my father looked at me and said, "You're more responsible and mature. You'll figure it out yourself, as you always do." After graduating from high school, I immediately joined the Marines because college was out of reach for me financially. Our family was purely struggling financially and unable to pay tuition. Meanwhile, Xander had a full college experience thanks to Mom and Dad's mysterious secret stockpile of money, which came out of thin air whenever their beautiful baby boy needed something vital. I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps, served 2 deployments overseas, and returned home with discipline, work ethic, and real-world experience. I used my GI Bill benefits to acquire a business degree while working full-time at a local gym chain, where I learned everything about the fitness industry from the ground up. I lived in a studio apartment that was essentially a glorified closet for 3 years, eating nothing but cheap pasta, canned tuna, and peanut butter sandwiches, and saving every dime I could to start my first gym. Xander? He dropped out of college after 3 years of relentless partying, for changed majors and barely passing grades. But according to my parents, he was simply discovering his true path in life and exploring his creative alternatives. By the age of 30, I had 2 highly successful gyms, a nice house in a decent neighborhood, and was working hard to build true generational wealth. Xander was 27 years old and had never kept a job for longer than 8 months. His routine was predictable. He'd acquire an entry-level job, work just long enough to qualify for unemployment benefits, then purposely dismiss himself and live on government aid while waiting for the proper career opportunity. But guess who was still the family's favorite? He had never done anything substantial or constructive in his adult life. Then Xander met Oilia, and that's when our family situation shifted from annoying to completely ridiculous. Oilia represented every terrible cliché about materialistic, superficial women in one irritating person. She got phony chest implants, lip injections, eyelash extensions, and acrylic nails that were so long and intricate that she couldn't do basic activities like type or unlock car doors. She'd never worked a genuine job in her life. Yet, she always had the latest iPhone model, designer purses worth hundreds of dollars, and outfits that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. She hooked herself to Xander like a parasitic leech because he was ignorant and naive enough to believe he could finance her absurdly extravagant lifestyle with his unemployment checks. And what about my parents? They adored her because she was meant to inspire Xander to be more ambitious and help him evolve into a responsible adult. Yeah, he was inspired to discover increasingly inventive methods to spend money he didn't have and would never get. The girl also had the cognitive abilities of a houseplant. I recall one particularly terrible family dinner when she inquired if my fitness centers were similar to Planet Fitness but more expensive, and then proceeded to confidently describe to me how the fitness industry operated based solely on what she'd seen in romantic films and reality TV shows. This amazing explanation came from someone who truly felt that cardiac activity was bad for your health since it made you too thin and feeble. About 2.5 years ago, my parents' phone calls were much more regular and urgent. These weren't casual, "Hey, how's business going?" social calls, but rather direct, "Lysander needs help with his electricity bill," emergency calls, or "Lysander's car needs expensive repairs," crisis calls, or my personal favorite, "Lysander and Oilia are having an unexpectedly difficult month financially," calls for bailouts. Initially, the requested amounts appeared to be little and reasonable. $400 for utilities, $600 for car troubles. I'm not going to lie, I helped out because I assumed that's what family members do for one another at difficult times, right? But every time I wired money to aid them, Lysander never called to thank me or explain the issue. Mom was always the one to make the initial request on his behalf, followed by a thank you call, as if he were still a helpless child incapable of handling his own communications. The demanded amounts gradually increased, and the supporting excuses became more inventive and complicated. $1,200 for a deposit on a much nicer apartment because their existing one was allegedly causing Oilia's bad allergies. She wanted to live somewhere more Instagrammable. $2,800 when Lysander was purportedly laid off unexpectedly, which I later discovered meant he was dismissed for arriving 2 hours late 3 days in a row while intoxicated. $3,500 for Oilia's alleged emergency dental work, which turned out to be solely cosmetic veneers since she wanted to become a social media influencer. The breaking point should have come last Christmas when Oilia posted elaborate Instagram stories documenting her week-long luxury spa retreat in Scottsdale, complete with expensive treatments and designer shopping. The same week that Lysander called me crying and demanding $2,200 for urgent car repairs that couldn't wait. But I was still playing the good brother character like a total idiot. The true wake-up call occurred 8 months ago when I went to Mom and Dad's house for our weekly Sunday family dinners. When I entered through the front door, Oilia was virtually throwing her left hand in everyone's faces, displaying this unbelievably massive engagement ring that had to cost at least $20,000. "Look what my amazing Lysander surprised me with," she exclaimed like a giddy teenager. "Isn't it absolutely perfect? I've been wanting something exactly like this for months and months." I looked right at Lysander, who was desperately avoiding eye contact, as if his life depended on it. For weeks ago, he called me in tears to say he needed $3,800 for unforeseen medical expenditures because he didn't have health insurance. "That's quite an impressive ring," I said, attempting to keep my tone neutral. "Must have been a very significant purchase." Oilia laughed and did this goofy little hair flip gesture. "Oh, Lysander always finds a way to give me exactly what I deserve. He's so generous and thoughtful about showing his love. Yeah, generous with my hard-earned money and attentive in keeping it hidden from me." During the same uncomfortable dinner, Oilia made multiple passive-aggressive remarks about how some people are simply not relationship material, all while staring directly at me with apparent judgment. I was 35 and single by choice. I had been too preoccupied with expanding my business empire and safeguarding my financial future to consider dating or marriage. But she made me feel like a pitiful failure because I wasn't married to someone who continuously squandered my money. "Maybe you should focus less on those gym things and more on finding a wife," she suggested with a patronizing sneer. "I mean, what's the point of making all that money if you don't have anyone special to spend it on?" My mother actually nodded in perfect agreement, as if Oilia were imparting deep insight. "She makes a really good point, Silas. You can't work every single day forever." That night, while laying in my own bed in my own home, which I had paid for with my own money, I made a clear decision. I was finished being their personal bank account. Things became unusually quiet for a few months after I stopped responding to their increasingly urgent money solicitations. I honestly thought they'd learned their lesson about financial responsibility or had found another stupid victim to fund their absurd dream lifestyle. I was completely wrong about both scenarios. Then Mom called 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and I should have realized something was wrong based on her tone alone. "Silas, sweetheart," she said in that unnaturally sweet, unduly joyful tone she saves for when she wants something incredibly vital. "Are you planning to come for Thanksgiving dinner this year?" To be honest, I had considered skipping the entire affair. Every family reunion felt like an exhaustive theatrical production in which I was compelled to play the role of the successful son who should be eternally grateful for the opportunity to address everyone else's financial and personal difficulties. But I made a critical mistake by saying, "Sure, I will come." "That's absolutely wonderful," Mom said, far too relieved and delighted for a simple Christmas dinner invitation. "It'll be so nice to have the entire family together for such a special occasion." The overwhelming joy and obvious relief in her voice should have been my first significant red flag. Mom was never actually enthused about holiday dinners, unless there was a huge underlying motive. When I arrived at their house on Thanksgiving morning, Oilia answered the door in what appeared to be a whole new dress from head to toe, perhaps costing more than most people earn in a week. Her artificial nails were freshly painted with an exquisite crystal and glitter pattern that must have taken hours at an expensive salon. "Silas," she said with the most obvious phony smile I'd ever seen. "Oh my goodness. Thank God you're finally here. We've been waiting and waiting for you to arrive." Red flag number 1 was literally waving madly in my face. Lysander stood in the living room looking more scared and agitated than I had ever seen him in our entire life together. When I stepped into the room, he could barely look up from his phone screen, and his leg was hopping rapidly, as if he was genuinely concerned about something significant happening. "Hey there, bro," he muttered without making any eye contact. Red flag number 2 had now joined red flag number 1 in a developing line of evident warning indications. Dad was acting normally, asking his typical surface-level questions about how things were doing at the fitness centers while Mom rushed around the kitchen making unnecessary dramatic gestures and movements. Everything looked typical and ordinary until we sat down at the dinner table, plates full. Mom cleared her throat in that very specific manner and gave me that particular look, the very same expression she used to give me when I was a kid, as if she were ready to ask me to undertake extra household chores that Lysander always managed to get excused from. "So, Silas," she explained, carving her turkey with almost surgical accuracy and methodical movements. "Lysander and Oilia have some really exciting news they want to share with the entire family. Here we go with whatever sophisticated plan they've devised this time." Lysander squirmed uncomfortably in his chair, as if he were sitting on something sharp and uncomfortable. "We're getting married next month." "Congratulations," I responded, but something felt odd about the rush timing and haste. Why the sudden need to get married so quickly? "It's going to be absolutely beautiful and perfect," Oilia exclaimed excitedly, clearly thrilled. "Small ceremony, just immediate family members, very intimate and romantic." Mom grinned, clearly proud and satisfied. They found the most perfect venue possible, very elegant and sophisticated. I waited patiently because after years of experience, I knew there was always a catch with these people. "The only thing is," Lysander finally remarked, looking squarely at his plate rather than at me, "we're running a little short on the venue deposit and all the catering expenses." And there it was, the true reason for the mandatory family dinner meeting. "How short are we talking exactly?" I inquired, knowing full well that this would be absolutely absurd and outrageous. Lysander and Oilia exchanged one of those meaningful stares that couples have before tagging someone for money. Then Oilia leaned forward across the table, wearing an outrageously entitled smile that made my skin crawl with revulsion. "It's honestly not that much money when you think about it," she answered dismissively, waving her hand as if she were talking about change. "Just $22,000. I actually almost choked on the food in my mouth. $22,000? "Well," Mom replied right away, clearly having practiced this speech, "when you actually break it down properly, it's really quite reasonable for a quality wedding. The venue rental is $6,000. Professional catering is $10,000. Floral arrangements are $3,000. And then there's the photographer, the musicians, the cake, and all the other essentials. Hold on just a minute, I said firmly. You haven't actually paid for any of this stuff yet? Oilia's phony smile became substantially tighter around the edges. We put down small deposits to hold everything, but all the full payments are due next Friday. I scanned the table slowly and deliberately. Everyone was looking at me expectantly, as if this intricate setup had previously been planned, and I was simply going through the motions before opening my wallet and fixing their issues. And you want me to pay for your entire wedding? Not pay for it exactly, Lysander replied hastily, attempting to sound fair. Just help out significantly, as a generous wedding gift from my successful big brother. Oilia laughed aloud, and it was the most condescending sound I had ever heard in my life. I mean, what else would you spend your money on anyway? You don't have a wife or children or any real family responsibilities. Your parents only love you when you pay their bills. The entire room became utterly silent. Even my parents seemed uneasy about how blatantly and viciously she had just insulted me. I carefully put down my fork and leaned back in my chair, glancing at my mother. Is that true, Mom? Rather than refute it, Mom smiled and nodded. Well, if you're not willing to help family, then you can't come to family events anymore. You can't come unless you pay off your brother's credit card. The words struck me like a physical blow. After everything I'd done and all the money I'd given them over the years, they saw me as a wallet rather than a son or brother. I got up slowly, grabbed my jacket, and smiled back at her. You know what? You're absolutely right, and that's why you'll never see me again. The transformation in the room was sudden and dramatic. Mom's confident smile disappeared instantly. Dad's face turned white. Lysander appeared to have been smacked. Oilia's arrogant face faded as she realized what had just occurred. Their faces fell as they knew they had lost me forever. Wait, Silas, I didn't mean. Mom began, but I had already moved toward the door. Yes, you did mean it. And now you get to live with it. I walked straight out the front door, not looking back. For 3 weeks following the Thanksgiving incident, my phone was continuously vibrating with incoming messages from every family member. Mom sent long, guilt-tripping text messages about how upset and wounded she was by my selfish actions over dinner. Dad left me several voicemails lecturing me on family loyalty and standing up when it really matters. Lysander sent several sad messages, usually complaining about how I was ruining his special day and hurting his happiness. But the greatest and most entertaining messages came straight from Oilia herself. This woman gave me genuine multi-paragraph essays about how I was a greedy, bitter person who was clearly envious of Lysander's happiness and success in life. She branded me sad for being alone at my age, strongly implied that I was probably gay, and concluded with increasingly vague warnings about how I would absolutely regret this decision if Lysander became phenomenally popular. The irony was really stunning. She was calling me envious and literally begging for my money to support her extravagant lifestyle and fantasy wedding. I meticulously screenshotted each message she sent me and saved them in a separate folder. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, all the messages came to a halt. I honestly assumed they'd either found another naive victim to fund their crazy wedding, or that they'd finally chosen to have a much smaller ceremony that they could actually afford with their own limited resources. As always, I was utterly wrong about both possibilities. For weeks later, my acquaintance, a loan officer at a major regional bank, contacted me to provide some very fascinating and troubling information. Hey, weird thing happened at work today, he nonchalantly stated. I saw your brother and his fiancée at our main branch earlier this afternoon. My gut plummeted with fear. What were they doing there? They were asking about substantial business loans. But here's the strange part. They were using your fitness centers as collateral and financial references. My blood became very cold. What exactly do you mean by that? They had official-looking paperwork claiming Lysander was a 50% business partner in your company. The loan officer who met with them was immediately suspicious because the documents looked potentially fraudulent. So, they didn't approve anything, but I thought you should definitely know about this situation. I quickly hung up and contacted my business counsel. After considerable investigation and research, we learned that Lysander and Oilia had been actively seeking to obtain large loans around the Dallas metropolitan area by using wholly falsified documents saying Lysander was a major owner of my fitness center business. They'd even prepared complex bogus employment records identifying Lysander as my director of operations, making $85,000 per year. They were aggressively seeking to conduct major fraud on my business reputation, credit history, and financial status. That's when I understood these people had passed a boundary they could never recover from, and I wanted to utterly destroy them rather than simply walking away and ignoring the problem. I spent the next 6 weeks systematically gathering all available information on their situation. I did not employ private investigators or do anything unduly spectacular. I recently began paying close attention to details and asking the correct questions of the right people in my network. First, I realized that the wedding was still taking place. Despite their apparent financial issues, they'd managed to save enough money for a little ceremony at a low-cost site outside of the municipal limits. But here's what was particularly interesting. Oilia was informing everyone on her social media sites that they decided on an intimate wedding, and that certain people who weren't supportive of their love were not invited. She was actually portraying my unwillingness to support their wedding as an intentional exclusion from their big day. Then I discovered something quite interesting about Oilia's background. My banker friend recalled that Oilia had visited his branch several months before when she and Lysander began dating seriously. She tried to register a business account for a multi-level marketing scheme, but during the routine credit check, numerous huge red flags showed on her financial background. I requested him to go a little more into her background. Banks exchanged data, and he owed me a big favor after I helped him get a great bargain on gym equipment for his home training space. What we discovered was very amazing and eye-opening. Oilia had quite a recorded financial history with men. She'd been married twice before, both times to men with significant wealth and holdings. Both marriages lasted only long enough for her to obtain legal access to their financial accounts and possessions. Both ended in bitter divorce processes in which she walked away with a sizable chunk of their assets while claiming various sorts of emotional and physical abuse. Lysander was going to be the third spouse, and he had no idea about the previous two. However, that was hardly the most interesting discovery I found. The most fascinating element was what I discovered about their present financial status from numerous sources. Remember all of the emergencies and unforeseen expenses that Lysander had asked me to assist with over the previous 2 years? In some ways, those were actual emergencies. Lysander had been spiraling into considerable debt while attempting to maintain Oilia's exorbitant lifestyle and spending habits. But instead of cutting back on expenses or having honest conversations about money, they'd been taking out payday loans at exorbitant interest rates, continuously creating new credit cards, and borrowing money from anyone who would lend it to them. They weren't simply plain broke. They were catastrophically, devastatingly broke. The type of financial scenario in which one missed payment could mean losing everything. What about Oilia? She had no idea about their true predicament. Lysander had been desperately concealing their true financial situation from her, while feverishly attempting to find new ways to keep the money flowing and maintain the appearance of financial success and stability. That's when I knew Lysander was no longer the spoiled golden child. He was absolutely trapped, perhaps afraid, and undoubtedly in over his head with a lady who would destroy him the moment she realized he couldn't afford her lifestyle any longer. So, I decided to hasten the eventual discovery process. The wedding was planned for a Saturday afternoon in February. I obviously did not attend the ceremony, but I had more significant and strategic plans for the weekend. You see, I'd spent several weeks meticulously assembling a complete information bundle that would transform everything. Screenshots of Oilia's abusive text messages, which called me pitiful and envious. Complete copies of all false loan documents they attempted to use with my company details fabricated on them. And the absolute crown treasure of evidence. A lengthy background study on Oilia's 2 past marriages, her well-documented history of financial manipulation and gold mining, as well as comprehensive proof of their present dire debt predicament. However, I did not convey any of this negative material to Lysander directly. That approach would have been too easy and predictable, and given our family dynamics, he was unlikely to believe anything I said. Instead, I delivered the complete comprehensive package directly to Oilia's mother, along with lengthy explanations. Here's what my extensive research found regarding Oilia's family history and circumstances. They were legitimately affluent, but they were completely consumed with their social standing, public appearances, and family reputation. Her father was a successful investment banker at a famous business, and her mother was one of those high-society country club women who prioritized their family's social standing above all else. They had been financially supporting Oilia for years without question, but they assumed she was in a serious relationship with someone financially successful and secure with promising prospects. They had no notion Lysander was bankrupt and in debt, and they certainly had no idea about their daughter's well-documented history of systematically marrying men for their money and assets. I sent the entire information packet to her mother with a short, clear note. I felt you should know who your daughter married and what kind of financial predicament she's gotten herself into. The wedding ceremony took place on Saturday afternoon. By Monday morning, 8 a.m., my phone was ringing insistently. It was Lysander, and he sounded more destroyed than any other human being I'd ever heard in my life. "Silas," he whispered, his voice quivering from sheer passion. "I desperately need to talk to you about something extremely important." "What's going on, Lysander? Can you possibly meet me somewhere today, please? I'll pay for coffee or lunch or whatever you want." He sounded completely shattered and defeated, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my primary gym site. When Lysander arrived 30 minutes later, he appeared to have not slept adequately in several days. His eyes were extremely bloodshot, his hands were visibly shaking, and he kept looking around nervously, as if he was worried someone bad might follow him. "She's completely gone," he stated without preamble or salutation. "Who's gone?" "Oilia. She left me permanently, took absolutely everything valuable, and just disappeared." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious. "Everything?" Lysander nodded miserably. "All the wedding gifts we received, the money her parents had given us for the honeymoon, even our security deposit for the apartment. She cleaned out our joint bank account down to the very last penny and vanished completely." "What exactly happened over the weekend?" "Her parents called her early Sunday morning while we were still at the hotel. They'd somehow gotten incredibly detailed information about our real financial situation, about my actual employment situation, and our debts. They flew down here immediately and had this massive screaming confrontation with her in the hotel lobby." Lysander ran his hands through his hair feverishly and repetitively. "She tried desperately telling them it was all lies and misinformation from jealous people. But then they started asking very specific questions about money, about my employment history, about all our credit card debts and loans. And she suddenly realized the complete truth about everything. She realized you're completely broke and have been lying to her. Worse than just broke. We owe over $50,000 in credit cards, payday loans, and personal debt from friends. Her parents immediately cut her off financially and told her she was completely on her own from now on. And Oilia," he laughed with absolutely no humor whatsoever. "She looked directly at me and said, 'I definitely didn't sign up to be poor and struggle,' and just walked out of my life forever." I sipped my coffee calmly and waited for him to resume his narrative. "Silas, I'm completely screwed beyond repair. Like absolutely and totally ruined beyond any hope of recovery. The apartment rent is due this week. All the credit card minimum payments are due, and I literally cannot make any of them. I'm going to lose everything I have left. What about Mom and Dad? Can't they help you out?" Lysander's face was utterly crushed with humiliation and disgrace. "They don't know how catastrophically bad the real situation actually is. They think I just need help with a few monthly bills and regular expenses. If they knew the actual truth about everything," he trailed off helplessly, "they'd be disappointed in you. They'd completely disown me forever and never speak to me again. You know exactly how Dad feels about financial irresponsibility and poor life choices." I almost burst out laughing at the tremendous absurdity of the scenario. Dad claimed to despise financial recklessness above all else. Yet, He had been personally encouraging Lysander's bad actions for years without even recognizing it. Lysander gazed up at me with the most pitiful, begging eyes I'd ever seen on another person. I know I've completely messed up everything in my life. I know I've been a terrible brother to you for years, but I'm literally begging you, Silas. Please help me one more time. I need your help more than I've ever needed anything in my entire life. How much help are we talking about exactly? 50,000 minimum, maybe 60 to get completely clear of everything and start over with a totally clean slate. I leaned back in my chair and watched his desperate expression. 60,000 to clean up a situation that could have been avoided if he had made even one decent decision. You know what, Lysander? You're absolutely right about some things. You did completely mess up everything, and you have been a terrible brother to me for most of our adult lives. His face dropped with terrible disappointment and anguish. But more importantly than any of that, you've been a user and a parasite for your entire adult life. For years and years, you've treated me like your personal ATM machine that exists solely for your benefit. You've never once asked how I'm doing personally or professionally. Never offered to help me with anything whatsoever. Never even bothered to say thank you when I bailed you out of your various messes and crises. Silas, please. I'm literally begging you on my knees. I'm not done talking yet. My voice was now ice cold. You married a gold-digging manipulator who insulted me repeatedly in our parents' house and then tried to commit serious fraud using my business reputation and credit. You've spent years systematically taking advantage of my success while contributing absolutely nothing to this family except constant problems, drama, and financial emergencies. Lysander was openly crying now, real tears flowing down his cheeks. I know everything you're saying is completely true. I'll change totally. I swear on everything holy. I'll get a real job immediately. I'll pay you back every single penny with interest. I'll do whatever you want me to do. No, you won't change. I stood up and carefully put on my jacket. You know why you won't actually change? Because you've never actually had to face real consequences. Every single time you've screwed up your life completely, someone has been there to fix it for you without question. Mom, Dad, me. We've all been enabling your pathetic, irresponsible behavior for decades. I gazed down at him, sad and broken in his chair like a defeated child. So, here's exactly what's going to happen moving forward. You're going to go home and figure this entire mess out completely by yourself. You're going to get any job you can possibly find and work your way out of this financial hole, $1 at a time, over many years. And maybe, if you actually learn something meaningful from this experience and demonstrate real change in a few years, we can discuss having some kind of genuine relationship. Silas, please don't do this. I'm your brother. No, I firmly said, marching toward the door without looking back. You're my parents' son. There's a significant difference between those two things. I went away from him forever. 6 months later, I learned from Mom that Lysander had filed for bankruptcy and was living in a tiny studio apartment across town while working double shifts at a warehouse loading trucks for minimum wage. Oilia had married a corporate lawyer she met on a dating service just 2 months after leaving Lysander. Mom and Dad were constantly urging me to help him financially, to be the larger person, and to forgive family since blood is thicker than water. I told them exactly what I told Lysander. Certain important life lessons can only be learned by first-hand experience and consequences. Lysander still contacts me on occasion, maybe every few weeks. He no longer asks for money. He learned his lesson the hard way. He's just trying to check in and gradually rebuild a friendship from the ground up. The conversations are really awkward and stilted, but perhaps it is exactly how genuine change and growth should be. Now on to the next story. Story 2. We couldn't save our 15-year marriage because my wife friend-zoned me and wants a platonic companionship. My wife, 35F, and I, 35M, have been married for 15 years, and we've been together for 20 years. We have 2 kids, 12, 14. We absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for them. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of our attention and resources with school, band, club sports, and other extracurriculars, and I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll that can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little sex, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much. We essentially became roommates, co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and very demoralizing. It was to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household because of that. We began seeking help with both individualized therapy and couples therapy, and it seems to have helped some. Little by little, we started to get along and started to have deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me she no longer was in love with me and that she only saw me as a best friend, that she only loved me in a very platonic way. And this was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy, let alone sex. This was very shocking to me, and quite frankly, I was devastated. I became angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I felt completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart and began to ask questions about where the root of this problem lies. And her answer was, "I don't know," and that "I have built up resentment towards you, but I don't know where it stems from." As you can imagine, this provides very little to no insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled. I'm frustrated. And I do not know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no sex drive and no desire for intimacy or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do, or what is it about me that is so unattractive or undesirable? And her response is always, "I don't know." She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same, that she has been feeling disconnected for years, and that our marriage just takes up too much work. Her focus is only the children for now, and that my co-parenting contributions are meaningful to her in our home. I'm at a loss, and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like at this point I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means with companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and my financial contribution to the household. In regard to intimacy and or sex, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to a point for any of that is to be intoxicated, which is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I do not think forcing herself to have sex or be intimate by drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that, which to my surprise, it upset her and made her more distant. We're both extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc., and we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else, and she declined. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward even with the hard topics, so I don't smell or feel any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to only be intimate or have sex when she's intoxicated? I'm firm on my stance of not partaking in this only when I'm high or drunk sex because it doesn't sit well with me. I do not know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to become a bit anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals and good-looking. We both have good standing careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. My wife of 15+ years is no longer in love with me and doesn't know why, and now says she can only have sex while intoxicated, or I need to settle for a platonic sexless marriage. And she doesn't know why that is, but it is what it is, and I'm in need of insight or advice. Relevant comments/missing reasons. Commenters looked at his history and found they were swingers. We did some swinging in the past that was fun for some time. We mutually decided to stop doing it, and we have established it's not the case when we were swinging. However, our marriage seemed to be in a good place. This is something we did disclose with our couples therapist and made sure to include it to make sure we're not neglecting an obvious potential issue. I will say I did ask my wife if what she experienced during swinging is something that is affecting her view on our relationship, and she said it wasn't. Our swinging experience was always together, and it was very sex-driven. Nothing really emotional or poly. Truth is, I have to believe her at her word. I have no reason to distrust her. To date, she's always been very forward and never afraid of dealing with things head-on, no matter how painful. If this is a consequence of swinging, this issue existed long before the lifestyle. I agree that swinging wasn't a solution in the end, never was meant to be. It was more of discovering or exploring if she felt any different. If that was the case, we agreed we would talk about it, and if we arrived at the conclusion that myself is the problem and she has no problem with other men, we would part ways amicably. However, this wasn't the case. She didn't like sex or intimacy there either. She was very much in control of that whole swinging situation, and yes, I went along with it. What gives? It felt very organic, and it was her effort, if you will, to discover more and learn more about our current issue. I saw it as a means of learning if I'm the problem and was very much ready to accept that. Turns out it wasn't the case. 6 years of misery sound awful. I would very much hate that. On if this started when the swinging ended. Finally, a comment on the swinging topic with actual insight. You're absolutely right about the fact that the swinging experience had things/changes that will impact our marriage and lives forever. For example, the best thing swinging taught us, even above sexual exploration, was the level of transparent and open communication it requires. We would literally have mental orgasms having dialogue with such intentionality. We implemented that in all our lives and areas, including parenting with our children. She even agrees that we're thankful for that takeaway from our swinging. Honestly, I cannot stress it enough with people here. Yes, we explored swinging, however, it was actually a positive experience. When we decided to stop, it was because it felt natural and organic to just do so. In fact, we met with that couple who we meshed super well with the night before. We actually enjoyed the actual friendship and even spent time as vanilla friends, so it wasn't because of something negative. Wife mentioned that it certainly wasn't any better, and since she's not enjoying the sex, we both agreed there's no point to this. I agreed, and we moved on, and we're still friends with those people because it's great. All that said, I know more often than not swinging causes massive issues. However, this was something we explored in pursuit of a solution to an issue that was present way before. I think of it as taking a practical approach to trying to solve the problem. Date 1. I wanted to give you guys an update of how the therapy session with my wife went this week. Not sure if this is helpful or not, but I took many of the responses/comments/suggestions from my initial post and put together some things I wanted to discuss with our couples therapist to help us navigate some of the core issues that may be affecting this situation. One of the main things that is the buzzword of this has been the term resentment. And it has been really eating me up inside knowing my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's resentful or doesn't know why this is affecting her emotionally/mentally. I brought this up with our therapist once again and resurfaced the conversation about being married for so long, 15 years, and being together since we were 14 years old. Our long history of growing up and how having children when she was 19 years old, me 20, significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships in the process, and we essentially had zero social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising babies. 2 kids now ages 12 and 14. She followed up with tons of questions directly, mostly from my wife, about her feelings towards this, and 90% of the responses were very our kids focused. It definitely felt like she was afraid of saying yes, it sucked, because she would feel guilt or shame because it would imply she regrets the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look at this outside of the lens of being a mother and to try to view it a bit more selfishly and individually, and it was very eye-opening. My wife mentioned that she was very frustrated with the fact that we did miss out on many things in life. She also was very clear in saying, I do not think I missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but I certainly lost all my friends. This was huge because one of the big pieces that has caused a strain in our lives is how siloed and isolated we've been. Again, busy raising kids. I followed up by reminding her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about friends and how it is important to have them in life, especially when you have similar peers that can help in many areas of life that perhaps we have no experience navigating and even simply for enjoyment. It has always been something my wife avoids, even though she's always been someone who needs that external stimuli. The main reason for her not investing in friends or even herself has always been the kids. Like I mentioned earlier in this post, 90% of the answers have to relate to the kids to some degree. At this point in our session, I started to feel like there was a common denominator, the kids, in most of the frustrations and problems she was experiencing. So I simply asked her, "Do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids, in the sense that I got you pregnant so young?" I wasn't ready, but she said that she was upset at me for that. She also followed up with the fact that she knows that's unreasonable because it takes two to tango. I did feel like it was progress because it kind of gave us something to work on and help alleviate some of these burdens. So we agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships, both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we began to discuss what actionable items we would take from this session. At this point, it was still all very ambiguous and blurry as to what the outcomes were. I was very direct and very forward in asking my wife what her plan is moving forward. Note, I had decided prior to the session that should my wife say the same thing about being a co-parenting roommate, that I would take the 180 approach and essentially do me. She started basically saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or sexual with me as of now, and that she loves me immensely and she feels bad for not being there for me. As mentioned in my first post, I also brought up the brief swinging that happened, too, for the 50th time, said it wasn't a problem. I agree with her on this. This was something that was a mechanical approach for a solution to a problem that was very much in existence when we tried this. We both really have no issue with this. We know it happened, we tried it, and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that may cause resentment, and really, we ended up not getting anywhere else as far as the root for resentment, which was discouraging. I then basically expressed to my wife that I will not be okay with that arrangement. I told her that I've really done everything I can, and that this issue really has reached a point where it has nothing to do with me or requires me to do anything that I'm currently not doing. I was very direct and said that I will not be accepting this dynamic, and that I need to be with someone who is actively involved in our marriage, works towards resolutions, and is very much interested in maintaining an active intimacy and sexual relationship. I expressed how I'm not going to be a convenience, and that there was more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knows I love her dearly, and that I do want this to work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage so long as she is as well, and that if she wasn't, it's okay. However, I will not be a part of something where these efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I have no plans of leaving and I do not want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continues, that divorce will be the only outcome. Of course, tears were involved, and it was a very bleak and sad ending to the session. Still, nothing was said, and I walked out very discouraged and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very short and cold and transactional. The saddest part is realizing this dynamic already is very cold and transactional. Here is where it gets very interesting. I started working on implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I mentioned to my wife that, hey, things are going to be a bit different moving forward. I'm going to honor her roommate/co-parent dynamic without reproach, and that it should be no mistake that I'm not happy here and I am never going to be okay with it, but I am done working on it if she wasn't going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started to build distance and started to basically focus on myself, very short and transactional. She asked for help on some of her personal things, to which I declined, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained to her that she is now fully in charge of her own life and her own issues. We didn't talk all day, and we only spoke when necessary. A few days, I keep this going, and she's very visibly upset and stressed. I typically react to that with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night she was crying, telling me she's stressed and she thinks something is wrong with me because I'm indifferent. I simply listened, then I told her that this is the dynamic she proposed, and that I'm simply, much like her, taking care of myself and focusing on myself. I'm not going to lie, it has been very hard to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned before, I love her and I wish I could hold her and love on her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative in a way just to get her way and still keep me in the friend zone. So I've been staying the course. We're now going on a week of this 180, and let's just say there has been many changes on her side. I think she is starting to realize there is more to me than just friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago essentially itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50-50, and she lost her. She basically told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, "Hey, friends go in 50-50s, and as your friend, I expect nothing less." This was very eye-opening because it gave me a glimpse of how I'm really taken for granted and how her level of comfort and convenience at my expense is really overlooked. I pushed through anyway and basically told her that this is the new dynamic she asked for, and that it's still a bargain because she would have to be 100% if she was on her own. I'll wrap up with this. While the 180 has been working in many different areas, I am still very much sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements being said and realizations that have not been pleasant to encounter. It has also sparked new energy and new efforts on her side as well. She's definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn down, I hope if things improve, this continues to happen. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she pretty much neglected herself for years. I'm very pleased seeing her be more herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There really is no telling at this point where this will go. We are very much cordial and amicable even to this day, and that's a very good sign. Boundaries are set and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I will be at peace with everything that has been done. We're still going to continue the couples therapist until we either rekindle our marriage or end up in divorce. I feel like having this unbiased third party really helps as a witness and as a guide through this. No matter what, I will always love my wife. However, I will not participate in a sexless/intimacy-less marriage because we both deserve better. Thank you all for all the kind words and recommendations and feedback. This will be my last post on this topic, and I wish you all the best. TLDR, my wife friend-zoned me, wants to just co-parent at my expense, but I started the 180 method to try and find a solution because she doesn't want to work on us, which seems to be working on getting her out of her rut and helping me discover more about how she feels. Also, therapy is paramount and highly recommended to all couples. Relevant comments. Comment 1. So I'm going to assume that your wife has a lucrative job and you are both going 50-50 THS on childcare as you both work and share children, because otherwise this approach is just plain financially abusive, and if you're planning on saying, "I won't pay the bills unless you have sex with me," sexually abusive as well. Assuming that is the case and you aren't a total POS, I'm actually interested in how this works out for you. I feel like I'm in an unstated similar situation. We both work and have blended finances, but we don't go to bed together or eat together, have barely any intimacy, a kiss or two, hugs every couple days, and spend maybe 8 hours a week together, just the three of us, him, me, and the toddler, even less just the two of us, maybe 3 hours a week. Otherwise he is on his game or out playing sports, watching YouTube, or whatever else he does. It barely feels like a friend situation, let alone a marriage. I'm curious how she handles it as the spouse that presumably was pulling away first. I hope you keep us updated. Yes, we both have degrees, good careers, and while I make significantly more money, her salary is very proficient and above average. The 50-50s was not to nor hurt her financially, that is cruel, but mostly to send a message on what a roommate dynamic looks like in the real world. I really dislike how people immediately jump to conclusions about the finances as a way of manipulating her. It's not the case at all. Plenty of money left over after bills. However, 50/50s means she has less whatever money and the understanding that roommates share everything equally. Prior to this 180 approach, we did everything together and with our kids. We always saw ourselves as a unit that does things together, both alone and with the kids too. That's changed now, where I'm choosing to focus on more independent types of pastimes and focus. That is what has sparked her reaction and realization of, there's more than just roommates here. Comment 2. How does one dump half of the household expenses on the other person if they share a bank account? Or are your finances kept separately? Just curious how this would work if applied to my life. Excellent question. We shared everything. The proposed 50/50s was suggesting we place the necessary amount to pay bills in the same account, and any leftover money can be deposited to a new account. I think this is why she was very upset. She felt a huge loss of control knowing she won't be able to monitor my finances. Also, she felt a huge loss in her leftover money with this arrangement and saw that I would keep significantly more of my own. This is still being worked out because I think she is calling my bluff here, but my plan is to notify her next week as I modify my direct deposit and open a new account. It will definitely be more real there. To be clear for all the trolls here, yes, she will have less leftover money after responsibilities, and it's still enough to live on. Example for reference. Assume I make $3,000 a month, she makes $1,000 a month, responsibilities are $1,000 a month, so she'd contribute $500 and I would contribute $500, where before she would contribute only $250. This is the last comment I'll add regarding money and finances. She's fine and she's not hurting, I promise. When asked what if she leaves for another man. Interesting. She has no shortage of men hitting on her, and we're by no means jealous people, so I've witnessed this multiple times, and her reactions are somewhat indifferent. I will say if another man for her was the answer, she'd tell me or she'd have some inkling. Maybe there's no telling, but I think the problem is deeper than superficial attention from a different person. You might be right, and if this is the case, so be it. However, I'll live with peace knowing I left no stone left unturned. See thought. I know I would be disappointed and saddened if she did leave for another man that would accept the bare minimum, but I'd also feel at peace knowing it's not all my fault. I know I'm responsible in some way, to some degree. That's just marriage. I know sadness and depression will creep, but we'll both overcome. But if this does happen, at least there will be clear reasons and clarity as to why it did. Also, I know for a fact that she wouldn't cheat. We're both very blunt, open, and transparent. She would definitely tell me that she wants to step out on our marriage before it happens, as would I. We owe ourselves this respect for each other, and we actively practice it. New update. I debated for a long time on whether to submit an update on this matter. A few significant changes have taken place, and I felt it would be good to not only share with you but also to allow myself to process all of this in a uniform way. We are now almost 9 weeks in on the 180 method I mentioned I was starting, and it started to render some positive reactions for my wife. I explained in the previous post that she started to notice things that she previously took for granted, started to ask more about my whereabouts, and also started to notice I would go out with the kids more often without her, and she started to invite herself, to which I didn't decline. So much has changed, and it has changed for what seems to be for the better. This past Memorial Day weekend, my wife asked me if I wanted to go out for coffee because she wanted to talk to me about something. This was huge because I can't recall the last time my wife asked to talk to me about something important. I must admit I was very nervous and worried about what this could be about, and my mind was racing with the plethora of scenarios of what it could possibly be. Of course, I agreed, and we took some time away from the kids to have this conversation at a local coffee shop. The talk was very constructive in nature. There was a ton of insightful information about herself that helped me further understand where she is in life, both emotionally and mentally. We summarized what the core issues we are encountering are, and she asked me for help. This is new, and I cannot tell you how excited I was to hear something so sincere coming from my wife who for the last 2+ years has been absent. So after she was sharing all her thoughts, I proposed a plan that I felt was right for us. This is something that I had been thinking about these last few weeks, and I was planning on bringing this up in a few months if I noticed that things were not changing for the better. This date felt like the right place to share it since it goes hand in hand with what she talked about, and it also relates to the help she was asking me for. I started by first acknowledging her feelings and her concerns. I told her they are valid and how she feels is personal to her, and that I care that she feels this way because I don't like the thought of her being sad or depressed. I also told her that my goal still is and will always be for us to reconcile and be the happily ever after we vowed to be for each other, and that my love for her is as strong, if not stronger, as it was the day we said I do. I continued the conversation by telling her how I felt about the whole situation. Read my previous post for details, and how it affects me every day. I also clarified some things that she mentioned she was feeling because I've been very distant and monotone/transactional lately. I explained to her that I was very much trying to protect my feelings and emotions from the rejection and neglect, and that it wasn't personal, it was simply me safeguarding myself because I cannot control her, I can only control myself. This was a perfect segue way to the core of this approach, which is focused on self-accountability. I told her that for the longest time I was always working hard to make her happy and do things that I knew she enjoyed or wanted. However, I was always met with rejection and disappointment, which caused a load of stress on me. I explained to her that I had to make a change for myself. After all, I can only control myself and make the changes that I want for myself. I mentioned how I was starting to implement new habits and routines that help edify me, all while still executing all of our shared responsibilities, including parenting, finances, and daily living activities. I explained that the goal is to continue to improve myself both as a husband and father, learn more, and be healthier, among other things. She was very receptive to this. She told me that she sees what I'm doing and that she is proud of the changes she has seen. She also told me how she's starting to realize that she feels left behind and that much of the things that have affected her negatively are her own fault. Toward the end of the conversation, which was about 3 hours, there was a very high spirit of reconciliation in the room. I told her that my goal is to ultimately make this work. However, I was very clear that I was not going to live under the current circumstances. I told her that my heart wants her to be happy even if it means elsewhere, and that I also deserve to be happy myself. I also explained that I do not want our children to grow up thinking this was okay or normal because they deserve better as well. She told me she doesn't either. She told me she doesn't know what to do, to which I replied, "Let's set some clear goals. However, the goals will be for ourselves, not for each other." So here is what we established. 1. We are in charge of our own happiness. The key here is that she's not responsible for making me happy and vice versa. We both need to seek what that personal plan looks like individually. Also, we're both encouraged to include each other in taking those steps if we want, but it is not required. 2. We are in control of our own individual lives and our own journey. This means we're both responsible for finding the resources necessary to grow, change, and heal. We can definitely help one another when help is requested. However, unsolicited advice or help will not be rendered. 3. We are responsible for communicating. This ensures nothing is left unsaid. If it was never brought up or discussed, it never happened. We're not mind readers, and we need to take ownership when we fail to communicate. 4. Make a list of needs and wants. This gives us both clear directions about meeting each other's needs. This also gives us a choice as to what we want to choose to do, compromise on, or decline to do. This list also will not serve as a checklist for accountability. We made it clear we would not be bringing this list up for the purpose of arguing, and it was up to the other person to use the list as a tool for growth, transparency, or clarification. We concluded that it was up to us to decide if we will be happy doing these things for ourselves because we care, not to simply check a box. This was very important in order to establish long-term habits and not short-term band-aids, because you cannot make someone change or do something they don't believe is important. 5. Established a deadline, Memorial Day 2025. At the end of the conversation, we concluded by setting Memorial Day 2025 as a hard stop to evaluate our lives and our progress. We agreed we would do this with the clear understanding that we will independently decide if we are happy here. If we determine we aren't happy, we will be getting a divorce. We would also both assume full responsibility for what happened should we get divorced. For example, if needs were not met, it would mean my partner chose not to meet them. This places full responsibility on each other in all areas. The whole process requires that if needs were not met, the next question should be, did we do everything to address this issue? If yes, then we will have a clear conscience of what transpired and know we left no stone unturned. If, however, we didn't do everything to address the issue, it will mean the issue was not important enough for you or didn't care to meet those needs. This goes both ways in all areas. Like everything else, we established that the main motivator for change should be ourselves, and that if we did that, we would in turn begin to see beneficial changes towards each other. The goal is to ensure that everything we are doing for one another to meet each other's needs is being done because we want to do it for our spouse, not because she asked. Instead, it was done because I know it makes him/her happy, and I love seeing them happy. I felt it was important to mention to her that we are no longer required to do anything for each other. It is now more of a I want to do these things for each other. Ultimately, I felt the conversation was very positive and productive. Many tears were shed and lots of hugging ensued. I know this doesn't mean or guarantee anything. However, this has never happened before, and I can honestly attribute it to the 180 method. I cannot give any more insight on this method other than it's the only thing I did differently, and something new happened for what seems to be better. I've decided I will conclude and will refrain from this method moving forward as the plan now has changed. I'm planning to devote myself entirely to not only myself and my growth, but to also work on her needs and wants because I want her to be happy by my side. She said and agreed she would do the same for herself. We agreed we would help and build each other wherever we request for it, and that we will be approaching this as a team. As of today, some of the biggest changes I have noticed are her commitment to therapy and mental health. She is taking some antidepressants that are helping her. She is also more confident and in a far better mood more frequently. We have started to explore more ways of intimacy in multiple areas, such as physical touch and words of affirmation. Sex is starting to make an appearance, which is exciting. Side note: sex was very, very awkward to start when you've been abstinent for so long. We've also started to work out together, which is great, and have lost weight, which is also very exciting. Overall communication has improved, and I cannot wait to see where this leads. I hope this helps someone out there. I'm still very much interested in your feedback and thoughts on this. You all have been a huge help in giving me hope and insight into this tough journey. Trolls aside, many of you have really been instrumental in my journey, both emotionally and mentally. I will not be providing any more of updates until Memorial Day next year. I think it's now time to keep focusing on myself and start working on all the new opportunities that hopefully will arise with my wife. I wish you all the best in life and your relationships with those you love. TLDR. Our marriage took a turn for the better after the 180 method, and we're now working on ourselves, each other, and rekindling our marriage. We also set a deadline for next year to either remain together or get divorced. Now on to the next story. Story 3. During the celebration that was supposed to mark my big promotion, my boss gave the title to someone else, the newest hire. I smiled, raised my glass like everyone else, but deep down, I was crushed. The restaurant buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses. Warm golden lights hung overhead, casting a soft glow over the long table filled with my coworkers, all in high spirits. This evening was meant to be mine. I had given 5 solid years to this company, staying late, solving the messiest problems, mentoring newcomers even when I wasn't expected to. I went above and beyond every day. For months, Fernando, my boss, kept dropping hints that I was up next for the senior manager role. I had pictured the moment over and over. The applause, the pride, the moment I'd finally feel seen. As I straightened my navy dress and glanced around, everything felt perfect. The company was celebrating another successful quarter, and I was sure my time had come. Then Fernando stood up, tapping his fork against his glass. The room slowly went quiet. "Tonight," he began, voice clear and confident, "I'd like to recognize someone who's made a remarkable impact in a short period of time. It's rare to see this kind of drive and results so early on." That's when my heart sank. In just 3 months, he turned toward Juliana, the newest hire. "Juliana, your performance, leadership, and innovative thinking have set a new standard. That's why I'm proud to name you our new senior manager. Congratulations." The room erupted in applause. I sat frozen, gripping my champagne glass tightly. My throat burned as I forced a smile. I clapped along while Juliana, blushing, accepted the applause and her new title. Couldn't believe it. And then, as if trying to soften the blow, Fernando looked at me and added, "And Paula, of course, we truly value the hard work you put in." That was all. No title, no recognition. Just a throwaway line after half a decade of dedication. I forced my smile wider. "Juliana deserves it," I said, raising my glass. Fernando smiled. "She's already outpacing you, Paula. Maybe take a few notes." The group chuckled. Juliana let out an awkward laugh. "Oh, I wouldn't say that." But the damage was done. I laughed too. What choice did I have? Cry? Demand an explanation? Ask why he'd led me on for months only to blindside me in front of everyone? Instead, I sipped my drink and kept smiling. The night went on. I talked. I laughed. I pretended to celebrate. But inside I was already done. When the party ended and I stepped outside into the cool evening, I pulled out my phone. My hands shook a little as I typed a short email. Subject: Resignation letter. Hi, Fernando. Please attach my official resignation. Effective immediately. Best, Paula. I hit send without hesitation. As soon as the message left my outbox, I inhaled deeply. For the first time in a long while, I felt something real: relief. But that wasn't the end. Monday was coming, and Fernando had no idea what was waiting for him. The office felt different that morning. I walked in calmly, knowing my resignation letter was already sitting in his inbox. No panic, just peace. Everything around me looked normal. The receptionist waved. My coworkers were chatting by the coffee machine. Juliana was at her desk, clearly still riding the high of her new title. I wasn't angry with her. She wasn't the problem. The problem had a corner office and a history of empty promises. I calmly placed my bag down and turned on my computer. I wanted Fernando to come to me, right on cue. His door flew open. Paula, in my office now. The entire floor fell silent. Everyone turned. He sounded nothing like himself. Tense, shaken, almost panicked. I stood, smoothed my blouse, and walked toward his office. The door clicked shut behind me. He was already seated, staring down at a printed copy of my resignation. "You're leaving?" he asked, as if the words were foreign. "Yes," I said, taking the seat across from him. "Effective immediately, but why now? This feels sudden. We didn't even talk about this." I let out a short, dry laugh. "We didn't talk about Juliana's promotion either. But here we are." His jaw clenched. "Paula, it wasn't personal. She just outperformed you." "She's only been here 3 months," I replied, tilting my head. "But sure, if that's what you believe." He leaned in. "I do appreciate you. You've been crucial to this team for years. I don't want to lose you." I stared at him for a beat. "You say that now, but when it mattered, when you had the chance to show it, you didn't. Instead, you made me the punchline at my own celebration, and then told me to learn from someone who hasn't even unpacked her desk." His expression cracked. For once, he looked unsure. "Look," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe I mishandled it, but quitting like this, it's emotional. You're making a rash choice." I gave him a cold smile. "I sent that email Friday night, Fernando. If I were being emotional, I would have stormed out right then. But I didn't. I waited. I thought it through. I'm leaving on my terms." His fist clenched on the desk. "So what now?" he snapped. "Going to a rival company? Because don't forget you signed a non-compete." I chuckled. "Oh, Fernando, you really have no idea. I don't need to go to a rival," I said as I stood up. "Because while you were too busy ignoring everything I brought to the table, someone else was paying attention." His brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I took a slow, satisfying breath. "You remember Andre? The CFO you let go last year?" Fernando tensed. Of course, he remembered. Andre used to be one of the company's top executives, smart, strategic, and respected by most. But he and Fernando never saw eye to eye. After too many disagreements, Fernando pushed him out, convinced he could be easily replaced. "A few months back, Andre reached out to me," I continued calmly. "He's launching his own firm and asked me to oversee the operations team, a director-level position." I paused. I initially turned him down. I had still believed in this company. Then I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "But after what happened Friday night, that changed everything." I called him the moment I left the party. He repeated the offer, and that time I said yes. Silence. The kind of stunned silence that settles when someone gets blindsided. Fernando looked at me like he couldn't quite comprehend what I was saying. "You're joining Andre's company?" he finally asked, his voice tight with tension. "I start Monday," I confirmed. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out at first. Then he let out a sharp exhale. Paula, think this through. This place has been your home for 5 years. Surely we can work something out. We can talk about. I'm not here to negotiate, I interrupted smoothly. The decision's already made. His jaw tightened. If you walk out now, there's no coming back. I smiled. I won't need to come back. I got up and walked to the door. Right before stepping out, I turned over my shoulder. You know, Fernando, it's funny how people only start to value you the moment you're gone. And with that, I left him alone with his regret. As I stepped into the open office again, it was like the whole floor had hit pause. The usual Monday buzz had vanished. Conversations stopped. Keyboards fell quiet. People peeked over their cubicle walls. Some looked away as soon as we made eye contact. But they knew. And within minutes, they'd know everything. I returned to my desk with a calm expression, opened my laptop, and forwarded my resignation letter to the entire executive team. Subject: formal resignation. Effective immediately, I am stepping down from my role. This experience has been unforgettable. Best, Paula. Short, clear, and professional. But the message behind it couldn't have been louder. I was done. Just seconds after hitting send, the whispers started. One voice here, another there. A few shocked expressions and raised eyebrows. It didn't take long for the news to ripple through the office like wildfire. Then came the first approach. Paula, is it true? I turned and saw Rachel, one of the few people I actually trusted here. She looked stunned. I nodded with a quiet smile. Yeah, it's time. She exhaled sharply and shook her head. Wow. I get it. I just didn't think you'd actually leave. Neither did Fernando, I said under my breath. She laughed, but it was half a scoff. Well, he's a fool. Everyone here knows you deserve that promotion. A few more coworkers hovered nearby, pretending to check papers or send emails, but really just trying to eavesdrop. Even Juliana peeked up from across the room, her eyes darting from me to Fernando's office, unsure if she should feel guilty or grateful. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. About 10 minutes later, as I was sealing up the last of my personal items in a box, a notification popped up in my inbox. Meeting request from Fernando. Subject: urgent. Let's talk. Time: 15 minutes from now. Location: my office. I stared at the invite for a few seconds and sighed. Desperate people do desperate things. I didn't rush. I walked back to his office with deliberate calm. When I stepped inside, the door clicked shut behind me. Fernando looked different. The arrogance was gone. That confident, smug look he usually wore had vanished. Now he looked like someone who finally realized he'd made a huge mistake. Paula, he said, leaning forward. Can we talk? You're reacting emotionally. This isn't you. I chuckled softly. Fernando, I gave this company 5 years. The only impulsive decision in this room was yours. His lips pressed together tightly. Look, I admit the promotion could have been handled better, but we can fix this. Whatever Andre is offering, I'll match it. I tilted my head. You don't even know what he offered me. Does it matter? He shot back. We can make it work. A higher salary, more flexibility, maybe even... I raised my hand to cut him off. You still don't get it. Silence. I leaned in a little. This was never about money. It's always been about respect. He tensed. I'm not staying in a place that only values me when I threaten to leave. I'm not sticking around just because you're suddenly scared to lose me. If I wasn't worth anything to you before, why would I believe I am now? His nostrils flared slightly. He wasn't used to losing control. Paula, you're walking away from a steady job. For what? A startup that might fail. I smiled. That startup is being run by someone who sees what I bring to the table, and I'd rather bet on myself than stay somewhere that treats me like I'm disposable. I stood. Goodbye, Fernando, and I walked out. The act of packing up my life into a cardboard box felt surreal. As I made my way to the elevator, a few coworkers clapped softly, small acknowledgments of my quiet triumph. They knew. Juliana, still at her desk, finally stood and walked toward me. Paula, I didn't know. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't know what? Her mouth opened, then shut again. She knew. Of course she did. Maybe she hadn't planned it, but she definitely benefited from my loss. It's okay, Juliana, I said not unkindly. Enjoy the promotion. She flinched slightly, but I was already stepping into the elevator. As the door slid shut, I let out a long, slow breath. This wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning. The Monday after I walked out of Fernando's office for the last time, I stood in front of a sleek glass building, staring at the new chapter one was about to begin. Carter and Associates. Andre's company was smaller than my last one, but it was full of energy, purpose, and drive. People here weren't just maintaining a system. They were building something real. As I stepped through the doors, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement. No more being ignored. No more being passed over. No more Fernando. As I rode the elevator to the top floor, my reflection in the mirror doors looked different, stronger, sharper. This wasn't just a new job. This was freedom. And the moment I walked into my new office, a real office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a door I could actually close, I knew I had made the right decision. The morning flew by in a blur of introductions, meetings, and onboarding. But the vibe here was unlike anything at my old job. For one thing, people actually listened. During my very first leadership meeting, Andre turned to me with a smile. Paula, I want you to take charge of our new initiative. We're overhauling operations, and with your background, you're the best person for the job. Just like that. No jumping through hoops. No proving myself again and again. They already knew what I brought to the table. I nodded without hesitation. I'd love to, I said simply. A few teammates smiled in quiet approval. Andre just gave a calm nod like he expected nothing less. This was how work was meant to be. No drama, no politics, just respect. 2 days after I left my old job, the first cracks started to show. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Paula. Oh my God. Fernando is completely falling apart. Since you left, it's been a disaster. I smirked but kept reading. He had to call an emergency meeting because no one knows how to handle half the things you used to take care of. And guess what? Juliana isn't doing more than you. She doesn't even know what she's doing. I laughed out loud. Of course, naturally, Fernando had overestimated Juliana and completely underestimated me. Then another message came through. Also, get this. 3 clients already asked about you. When they heard you left, they were not happy. The rush of satisfaction I felt was indescribable. Fernando had taken me for granted for years, and now, finally, he was learning a lesson. Some people are not replaceable. That same afternoon, while reviewing strategy briefs in my new office, my assistant poked her head in. Paula, you've got a call on line 1. It's from a company called Dawson & Company. They said they used to work with you and want to discuss switching over. I blinked in surprise. Dawson & Company had been one of the biggest clients at my previous company. Put them through, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. A moment later, I heard the familiar voice of Mark Dawson, the CEO. Paula, he said warmly, I heard you joined Carter and Associates. We should talk. I leaned back in my chair as a slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. Of course, Mark. How can I help? Within a week, 3 of the top clients from my old company had reached out to me, all saying the same thing. Things just aren't the same since you left. We don't feel like we're in good hands anymore. If you're running operations at Carter, we want to move with you. And so, one by one, they did. I wasn't chasing after them. I didn't have to. They came to me because they trusted me, not the company I used to work for. And Fernando, he was scrambling. Rachel kept sending me updates. Juliana's drowning. She's in way over her head. Fernando was screaming in a closed-door meeting this morning. The board is furious about the lost clients. The investors are applying pressure. Word is Fernando's being told to fix things fast. I could practically picture his face. The panic, the regret, and the best part? I wasn't even trying to ruin him. I was just finally doing well somewhere else. That Friday afternoon, as I wrapped up my day, my phone buzzed with a new email from Fernando. Subject: Proposal. Paula. I'd like to have a conversation. I believe we can reach a mutually beneficial agreement if you're open to it. Let's schedule a meeting next week to discuss some options. Looking forward to your response, Fernando. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a soft, disbelieving laugh. He was desperate, and for the first time in 5 years I held all the power. I stared at that email, letting the weight of the moment sink in. The same man who once dismissed me without a second thought. Now he was chasing after me with an offer. The man who once laughed at my expense. The same man who told me, "Juliana does a lot more than you already." Now he was the one reaching out. And I knew exactly why. His world was falling apart. I didn't rush my response. No panic, no eagerness, just quiet, calculated control. Subject: a proposal. Fernando, I'm available for a short meeting Monday at 10 a.m. Let me know if that works for you. Best, Paula. I hit send and shut my laptop. I wasn't walking into that meeting to negotiate. I was walking in to watch him squirm. At exactly 10 a.m., I stepped into the familiar glass building I'd walked out of weeks ago. But everything felt different now. The receptionist hesitated before greeting me, unsure whether I was a visitor or a ghost from the past. Employees glanced up as I passed by, then quickly looked away. They all knew. And then I stepped into Fernando's office and saw him. He looked awful. Dark bags under his eyes, nervous energy in his fingers tapping on the desk. He wasn't the same smug man who once belittled me. "Thanks for coming," he said, forcing a strange smile. I sat down, crossing my legs and resting my hands in my lap. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He exhaled and leaned forward. "I won't waste your time. We need you back, Paula." I didn't say a word. I let the silence do the talking. He continued a little slower now. "I misjudged your importance. I'll admit that, but we can fix this. If you return, I'm ready to offer you a significant raise, a senior executive title, and full control of your department." He leaned back like that offer should have blown me away. Didn't. I tilted my head. "Let me get this straight. You had 5 years to see my worth. 5 years to give me a promotion. 5 years to show respect." I paused for a moment before continuing. "And instead you passed me over for someone who had been here 3 months and told me to take notes on how to be better. Now that you've lost clients and your company's falling apart, suddenly you're ready to give me everything I deserved all along." Fernando's jaw tensed. "Paula, come on." I held up a hand and cut him off. "Let me ask you something. If I never left, would I be sitting here right now? Would you be offering me this out of appreciation? Or is it just because you're losing control?" His silence was the answer. He tried to hide it, but I saw it in his eyes. The truth. He never saw my value. Not until it cost him everything. I let out a small, amused laugh. That's what I thought. The desperation started to show in his voice. "Paula, be smart. You have history here, a future. Do you really want to throw away all the work you've done?" I smiled. "Fernando, you still don't get it, do you?" I stood up, straightened my blazer, and leaned in slightly. "I never needed you. You needed me, and now you're finally realizing that." His expression darkened, but I saw it. The flicker of panic behind his eyes. I walked toward the door, and just before stepping out, I paused. "Take notes, Fernando," I said softly, echoing his words from before. "Maybe next time you'll learn to appreciate the people who actually keep your company running." Then I left, and this time I didn't look back. Back at Carter and Associates, everything was thriving. Our client list had nearly doubled. More and more companies were leaving Fernando's sinking ship and coming to us. And then one quiet Friday afternoon, Rachel sent me one final update that made me laugh out loud. Fernando just got fired. The board forced him out. They couldn't recover from all the clients they lost. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. Perfect. Fernando thought I was replaceable. Turns out he was. And me? I was exactly where I was meant to be. Now on to the next story. Story 4. On the day we won the National Esports Championship, My girlfriend of 8 years told me she wanted to personally hand me flowers on stage. Standing on the podium, eager and nervous, I reached for the ring I had hidden, ready to make a grand proposal. But then, with a radiant smile, she handed the bouquet to her best friend, Lucas Costa, right in front of everyone. Under the spotlights, they became the center of attention, both on stage and all over Twitter, as people showered them with blessings. Lucas's fans even tagged me in posts. "We told you to stop clinging to our favorite couple." Feeling humiliated, I calmly posted a response. "Respect. All the best to you too." Under the bright spotlights, I stood on the podium next to Juliana Duarte, my girlfriend, as she slowly walked toward me, holding a bouquet of roses. She had already told me that when I finally won the national championship, she would reveal our relationship during the awards ceremony. That night, she seemed to be there just for me, holding roses that symbolized love. It was the first time she had ever given me flowers, and her expression was so tender. Blushing, I suppressed my excitement, watching her approach with all my focus. In my mind, everything was already planned. The moment she handed me the flowers, I would drop to one knee, pull out the ring, and propose to her live for the entire nation to see. Even though we had argued yesterday over some trivial matters, what couple doesn't fight occasionally? Nervously, I rubbed the ring box in my pocket. "Congratulations on your championship." Juliana extended the flowers toward me, and just as I was about to take them, with a radiant smile, she passed the bouquet right past my hands and firmly placed it in the arms of my teammate, Lucas Costa. Lucas, Juliana's best friend, had known her longer than I had. The smile on my face instantly froze. Staring at my girlfriend who gazed affectionately at Lucas, I was paralyzed before bitterly laughing at myself. It was Lucas again. I should have known. To Juliana, her best friend had always been more important than her boyfriend. Even our argument yesterday had been about Lucas. But I never imagined she would openly hand him a bouquet of roses, symbols of love, in front of everyone. Lucas, with his good looks, had a far larger fan base in the gaming circuit than the rest of us did. Did Juliana not realize what it meant to give him flowers in front of so many people? Quietly, I slipped the ring back into my pocket as the crowd's cheers reached a deafening peak. The roar was so loud it felt like it might lift the arena's roof. Amid the camera flashes, everything around me seemed to dim. Before the award ceremony even ended, their sweet moment was already trending on Twitter. Their chemistry as a shipped couple ignited countless fans, cheering for them. Lucas's fans flooded the comments of videos, tagging Juliana and calling her sister-in-law. The scene was lively and joyful, but none of it had anything to do with me. Forcing a bitter smile, I stepped off the stage and returned to the locker room alone. Looking at the flood of blessings on Twitter, I suddenly felt exhausted. Maybe this was the perfect time to end everything. I sent Juliana a message. "Let's break up. I won't get in your way anymore." The message had barely been sent when Juliana called. I had no intention of answering. I hung up and took a ride back to my apartment to pack my things. It was the apartment we shared, and now that we were done, there was no way I could continue living under the same roof as her. She could keep the apartment while I packed my belongings. Juliana bombarded me with messages. "What do you mean by breaking up? Are you sulking again? Be a man. Okay? Everyone's saying we should be celebrating. Come on. Lucas and the others are waiting for you." Every word revolved around Lucas. She gave roses to another man and then called me petty. I looked at my phone and let out a cold laugh. Then I turned it off, zipped my suitcase and left. With no time to find another place, I went back to the dorms at Apex Gaming's base, where the team had rooms for the players. The base was silent. Everyone was out celebrating. Instinctively, I turned on my computer and logged into the game to train. Only in the game could I find some peace. It was late at night when Juliana called again. I was still practicing. I glanced at the phone on the desk, pressed the mute button, and ignored it. Then came a flood of messages. "Why aren't you home yet? Where are you? The flowers I picked for you are wilting. Where are you? Didn't you say you like my flowers? Do I need flowers? Flowers given out of guilt? I turned off the screen, a bitter smile forming on my lips. She was always like this, offering a slap followed by a sweet gesture. I loved her so much that I never saw a problem with it. I convinced myself it meant she cared about me. But now I was awake. I saw her for who she truly was. It was time to move on. No one is irreplaceable, not her, not me. That night, I stayed up training and only went to bed the following afternoon. When I finally made it to the gaming room, Juliana was sitting in my chair, lost in thought. I wasn't surprised she had found me. Where else would I go but the dorm? Hearing my footsteps, she turned and saw me. Where were you last night? I called and messaged you. I thought something had happened to you. Clearing my throat, I replied coldly. I went to bed early. She looked stunned, her brows furrowing in confusion. What's wrong with you today? You're acting weird. It was true. The old me would have been thrilled to see her show up here, eager to pour out all the recent frustrations. Now there was only silence. Naturally, she found it strange. She also seemed to have forgotten that I had already broken up with her yesterday, or how she had humiliated me in public. Before I could say anything, she spoke again. Today is Lucas's 3-year anniversary with the team. He's hosting a dinner. Let's go together. I wanted to come up with an excuse to refuse, but as teammates, my absence could create unnecessary issues. Besides, I needed to let everyone know we were over. I nodded indifferently, got dressed, and followed her to the hotel. When we arrived, I realized the event wasn't just for Lucas's friends. It was practically a fan gathering. Before we even entered, the noise from the Bellwood Hall was deafening. I looked around for Juliana, but she had disappeared into the crowd. Looking for Juliana? Let me take you to her, said Camila Monroe, appearing out of nowhere. She guided me to a private suite where I could see the stage below. Juliana appeared, pushing a massive cake while holding a string of pink and white balloons. It was Lucas's surprise gift. Fans were screaming wildly, urging them to get married on the spot and calling Juliana sister-in-law. Camila raised her eyebrows at me and gestured toward the stage. Don't you think they look perfect together? I swallowed hard, bitterness rising in my throat. They did. They really did. Juliana had never gone to such lengths for me. Even on my birthday, when I asked for a cake, she just complained impatiently, saying, "We're adults. Why bother with pointless formalities?" And now here she was, making such an effort to prepare a grand surprise for Lucas in front of everyone. In the end, people only go out of their way for those they truly care about. Camila Monroe watched my reaction, clearly relishing how much it hurt me. She smiled a sly and provocative smile that twisted like a thorn in my heart. After the event, Juliana and Lucas returned to the private suite. Camila immediately wrapped her arm around Juliana and teased her. "You went all out for Lucas. Aren't you worried your boyfriend will get jealous?" Juliana froze, then looked at me. A flicker of guilt crossed her eyes. "Next time, for your birthday or our anniversary, I'll plan something just as big for you," she said hesitantly. I shook my head lightly. "Don't bother. If it's the same thing you've already done for someone else, how could it be considered a surprise?" I wasn't going to accept anyone's leftovers. Juliana pressed her lips together as if she wanted to say more. Before she could, Lucas stepped in. "Logan, you're not serious, are you?" Juliana was just following the publicity plan. "Don't be so petty. As her boyfriend, you should be more understanding. Don't make her guess what you're thinking all the time. It's exhausting for her." Classic Lucas, always stepping up to defend Juliana. I let out a soft laugh. "With you taking care of her, why would she need anyone else?" The words carried a sharp edge, instantly freezing the room. Lucas sighed dramatically, offering a resigned smile. "All right then, if it makes you feel better, I apologize. Don't take it out on Juliana." The tension hung in the air until someone stepped in to break the mood. "Come on, we're all teammates, no need for formalities. Let's have a drink." Camila, with a mischievous smile, stepped into the center. "That's not the only story. Yesterday, Juliana gave Lucas flowers too." She laughed and glanced at me, seeking my confirmation. Juliana seemed to think Camila had pinpointed the issue. She turned to me. Are you upset over something so trivial? Casually, she added, I bought flowers for you yesterday too, but you left early so I couldn't give them to you. I still have them. She walked over to a corner of the suite, retrieving a small, wilted bouquet of Lizzie Anthas from a box full of beer bottles. As soon as she showed it, someone stifled a laugh. It became painfully obvious why. The Lizzie Anthas bouquet looked embarrassingly cheap compared to the extravagant roses she had given Lucas. Lucas still had the roses, making the comparison even starker. I could feel the mocking glances around me, silently ridiculing the idea that I could ever compare to Lucas. Lucas raised his eyebrows, a triumphant smile plastered on his face, pretending to scold her. He looked at the Lizzie Anthas and said, Juliana, you should have given Logan roses. Why this? The tone barely disguised his belief that I was getting the leftovers. Juliana replied, It was late after dinner yesterday. There weren't any roses left. This will do. He doesn't understand flowers anyway. He shouldn't care. The best for Lucas and the leftovers for me. The difference between love and indifference couldn't have been clearer. Why did she assume I wouldn't care? She held the flowers out to me, but I didn't take them. Juliana frowned again. You don't like flowers anymore? I chose these especially for you. No thanks, I replied coldly. Give them to someone else. You're being ridiculous again, she retorted. I'm not. I mean it. I have things to do, so I'll leave you to it. I opened the suite door and walked out without looking back. I had barely taken a few steps before hearing the whispers. Logan's being so dramatic. The video of Lucas and Juliana is blowing up online. It brought a bunch of sponsors to the studio. Why is he so hung up on this? Exactly. Juliana, finally losing her patience, tossed the flowers aside. Forget him. Let him sulk. Each harsh word cut me like a blade. Pausing mid-step, a wave of sadness washed over me. To her, I was utterly insignificant. I left the suite with firm steps, but inside, my mind was boiling. Every word I heard echoed like daggers. To Juliana, I was nothing. To Lucas, an obstacle. And to everyone else, just a supporting character in a narrative revolving around their perfect couple. As I walked down the empty hotel hallway, one thought grew in my mind. I wouldn't let myself be humiliated like this again. Once I reached the street, I took a deep breath and called a ride back to the team's base. During the drive, my mind was filled with memories, from the early years with Juliana to the present. I remembered all the times I had put her desires above mine, the arguments where she made me feel guilty over things that weren't even my fault, and above all, how Lucas had always been there, taking up space that should never have been his. Deep down, I knew I'd been a fool, but that ended now. As soon as I got back to the base, I started crafting a plan. It was clear my relationship with Juliana was over, but this went beyond a breakup. It wasn't just about me. It was about respect, about not letting anyone step on me again, and most importantly, it was about showing her and Lucas that I wasn't the weak person they thought I was. The first thing I did was message the team manager, requesting a personal meeting the next morning. I didn't specify the reason, but I knew it was a crucial step. Lucas was one of the team's cornerstones, but I had an advantage: my skill. Unlike Lucas, who relied on charisma and marketing, my results spoke for themselves. If the team had to choose, I was confident they'd think twice. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent hours reviewing our contracts and strategies. There were clauses Lucas violated constantly, from personal use of the team's brand to conflicts of interest in advertising deals. I gathered enough evidence to protect myself if needed. Additionally, I started planning my exit. I knew that if I truly wanted to rid myself of this toxic environment, I had to forge a new path, perhaps even start my own team. The next morning, I walked into the manager's office with my head held high. He seemed surprised by my determination but listened closely as I laid out my concerns. I was direct. Either the team took action against Lucas and his interference in the professional environment, or I was out. I explained how his behavior was harming team harmony, using recent incidents with Juliana as examples. The manager looked visibly uncomfortable but promised to investigate. As I left the office, I found Juliana waiting for me in the hallway. She looked furious, but also had a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "What are you doing? Do you think you can just ignore everything and act like you're the center of the world?" She was trying to regain control, as always. I stared at her, and for the first time, I felt a coldness I'd never experienced before. "I'm just doing what you've always done. Looking out for myself." Juliana seemed at a loss for words. For the first time, her confidence wavered. Maybe she was starting to realize I wasn't the pushover who tolerated everything in the name of love. That night, I did something I had never done before. I posted a statement on social media. It wasn't a direct attack, but it was enough to share my side of the story. I talked about how the professional environment had become toxic, how personal relationships were interfering with team performance, and how I was reconsidering my position. The reactions were swift. While many supported me, some of Lucas and Juliana's fans tried to attack me, but this time I didn't care. I was ready. The final straw came the next day when one of the team sponsors contacted me privately. They had seen my statement and wanted to know more. During our conversation, I realized I wasn't the only one unhappy with Lucas and Juliana's influence. The sponsor suggested I consider leading a new team with their financial backing. That's when everything clicked. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about building something bigger. Without notifying anyone, I left the base that same day. I sent Juliana one last message. "You'll understand what you lost when it's too late." After that, I changed my number and started working on forming my new team. The transition wasn't easy, but little by little, I gathered talented and committed players who shared my vision. Meanwhile, my old team began to fall apart. Lucas and Juliana continued to be the center of attention, but the team's performance started to decline. The audience, once so dedicated, began losing interest. Without victories to back up their image, they were left clinging to empty marketing. Eventually, sponsors began pulling out. Months later, my new team was ready to compete. Our performance exceeded all expectations, and our success drew media attention. In the first tournament where we faced my former team, we not only defeated them but made it clear who the real professionals were. At the end, as I held the trophy, I spotted Juliana in the audience, her expression a mix of regret and disbelief. I didn't need to say anything. Her silence was my greatest victory. Since I left everything behind and started building my own team, my life has changed completely. It wasn't easy in the beginning. I was starting from scratch, with limited resources and only the confidence that my skills and vision could lead to something bigger. But slowly, the hard work began to pay off. I brought together talented players who, like me, were hungry for victory and determined to prove their worth. In the first few months, the new team trained relentlessly. The base we rented was modest, almost improvised, but the atmosphere was unlike anything I had experienced before. There were no internal rivalries or inflated egos. It was a united group, driven by a passion for the game. At our first official tournament, we exceeded all expectations. We made it to the finals, and even though we didn't win the title, we proved to the industry that we were a force to be reckoned with. That was enough to attract our first sponsors, who saw immense potential in us. Over time, the victories started rolling in. Each championship we won was another step toward the top. Our team wasn't just winning trophies, we were earning respect. We gained recognition in the media, and I, as the leader and founder, became an influential figure in the esports world. Interviews, speaking engagements, and sponsorship deals began pouring in, bringing the financial stability I had always dreamed of. While my new team thrived, my former team, with Lucas still as one of its main players, was falling apart. Their poor performance continued, and the toxic relationship between Lucas and Juliana started to draw public and sponsor attention. Gradually, the offers dried up, and both of them began losing the status they once held so dear. During this time, my personal life also took a turn for the better. At a charity event organized by sponsors, I met Clara, a journalist who covered the esports scene. Unlike Juliana, Clara was someone who truly saw me for who I was, without ulterior motives. She admired my work but was also interested in me as a person, beyond the game. We started dating, and for the first time in years, I felt what it was like to be with someone who genuinely respected and supported me. Clara not only understood the intensity of my work, but also encouraged me to keep striving for more, without ever making me feel guilty for it. As my career and personal life soared, the inevitable happened. One day, I received an unexpected email from Juliana. She said she was looking for an opportunity to return to the competitive scene and asked if I would consider offering her a position on my team. The message was polite, almost humble, but it carried a tone of desperation I never thought I'd hear from Juliana. 2 days later, I received another message, this time from Lucas, with a similar tone. He acknowledged that his career was in decline and asked if he could contribute to my team in some way. I read those messages with a mix of disbelief and satisfaction. Who would have thought that the couple who once dismissed and humiliated me would now be asking for my help? But more than anything, I knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. Responding to them would be an opportunity to show that I was no longer the Logan who accepted scraps. I sent brief but firm responses to both of them. I made it clear that my team had values and an environment I worked hard to protect. I explained that I didn't see how they could fit into a system that valued cooperation, respect, and teamwork above all else. I thanked them for their interest but declined politely. For me, that was enough. I didn't need to humiliate them publicly or expose them. Simply showing that the respect they had never given me was now non-negotiable was more than enough. A few weeks later, I ran into Juliana and Lucas at a competitive event. They looked visibly different. Not the confident stars who once dominated the cameras and the crowd. When they saw me, they tried to mask their discomfort, but it was impossible not to notice the shame in their eyes. I greeted them politely but kept my distance. I didn't need a confrontation or anything else. My mere presence was enough to remind them how much things had changed. Clara was by my side at that event, and the way she looked at me, proud and confident, was enough to remind me that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not just as a player or team leader, but as someone who had found their true strength. Today, my team is one of the most respected in the global esports scene. We've won major titles, secured million-dollar contracts, and expanded into other ventures such as streaming and content creation. My fan base has grown, but what truly matters is knowing that I've built all of this from the ground up, with my own effort, and without stepping on anyone in the process. Juliana and Lucas are still around in the scene, but no longer relevant. Sometimes I hear rumors that they're still trying to get back to the top. But the truth is, the esports world moves forward, and they've been left behind. For me, what happened to them isn't revenge. It's just life giving back what they sowed. I've moved on with achievements, respect, and a life alongside someone who truly values me. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Jason. I'm 34, and I used to think that love, real, lasting love, was something you could build like a house. With enough work, it'd stand through anything. I met Vanessa when I was 26. She was lightning in a bottle, sharp-tongued, ambitious, and the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. I was quieter, steadier. I worked in architecture, and I liked things with structure. She thrived on chaos. Somehow, we balanced each other out for a while. When we got married at 29, I thought we were solid. We bought a house together. We split bills. We hosted dinner parties. She said she wanted to wait before kids so she could focus on her career. I supported her. I handled most of the housework, ran errands, stayed up late helping her prep for big client meetings. I thought we were a team. I didn't realize she'd started seeing me as dead weight until it was too late. Things shifted about a year ago. Little things at first. She stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. We stopped having dinner together. I'd get home from work and find her already in bed, scrolling through her phone with this glazed, distant look. I'd ask if everything was okay and she'd smile tight-lipped and say, "Just tired." That was her favorite phrase for the last few months of our marriage. Just tired. Around March, she started spending more weekends away. Girls' trips, she called them. I never questioned it. I trusted her. And I think deep down I didn't want to know what was really happening. I didn't want to admit that the woman I loved was pulling away one silent mile at a time. Then came our 6th wedding anniversary. She told me weeks in advance that she was planning a surprise party. "Don't make any plans," she said. "It's going to be special." She smiled that way people do when they know something you don't. I figured she was finally rekindling things, maybe trying to reset us. I bought her a necklace she'd been eyeing for months. I had it engraved with the coordinates of where we first met. I was ready to fight for us. The party was at her parents' estate, which should have been the first red flag. I arrived and immediately noticed something was off. There were banners that read, "Fresh Starts," and "To New Beginnings." I thought maybe her parents were renewing their vows or something. But no. Every eye turned to me as I stepped into the backyard, and it hit me like a punch. This wasn't our anniversary party. This was something else entirely. She stood by the gazebo in a white dress, not bridal but flashy. And as soon as she saw me, she waved me over like I was late to my own funeral. I walked up confused, clutching the little velvet box in my pocket like a fool. Then she grabbed the mic. "Everyone," she said, her voice bright and rehearsed, "thank you for being here tonight. This is a special evening because I finally get to let go of what's been holding me back." I blinked. She turned to me and, with the mic still in her hand, pulled a manila envelope from behind her back. "Jason," she said loud enough for every cousin, aunt, co-worker, and friend of a friend to hear. "This marriage has been educational, but I've outgrown it, and tonight, I'm upgrading." She handed me the envelope. Inside were divorce papers. My heart didn't break. It froze. Couldn't even feel my hands. Her sister hooped and clapped like she was watching a gender reveal. Her mother popped open a bottle of champagne and handed flutes around. Her uncle actually took photos like it was some triumphant, Instagram-worthy celebration of freedom. I didn't move at first, just stared at the envelope in my hand. And then, with every ounce of strength I had, I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I refused to let her take my dignity, too. I pulled the pen from her hand, signed the papers, handed them back, and said, "Thank you for the reminder," and I walked out past the clapping, past the cameras, past the life we'd built that apparently meant nothing to her anymore. The drive home was quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in silence, my hands tight on the wheel, trying to piece together what had just happened. By the time I got back to our house, my house now, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to fall apart for someone who popped champagne at my humiliation. I took a leave of absence from work for a month. Got therapy. Got a lawyer. Transferred the house into my name. She hadn't touched the paperwork after we refinanced, so it was easy. I canceled all our shared accounts. I even reached out to a few mutual friends. And let's just say the story they told about her girls' trips added up with what I found on her old iPad. Apparently, upgrading meant a tech startup guy named Brandon. Younger, flashier, dumber from what I could gather based on his social media posts. I didn't confront her. I didn't rage. I just disappeared from her world with the kind of clean silence that echoes longer than shouting ever could. Months passed. I sold the house, moved to a different city, took a higher-paying job that gave me a view of the water from my office window. I started running again, reading again, living again. Then this morning, exactly 6 months from that backyard humiliation, my phone buzzed. 10 missed calls, all from Vanessa. Then came the texts. "Can we talk? I miss you. I made a mistake." And the last one, "Please just open the door." I looked out my window. There she was, parked at my gate, makeup smudged, hair a mess, eyes red from crying. But I didn't move. I just sat there watching while the silence hung in the air like a question with no good answer. I watched her for a while from behind the curtain. She didn't see me. She just sat there gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Every few seconds, she'd glance down at her phone, probably hoping I'd reply. Then she'd look up at the gate again. She must have been parked there for at least 20 minutes. I won't lie, part of me felt something twist in my chest. Not because I missed her, but because I used to love her genuinely. I would have burned down the world for her once. And now here she was, ashes in her own fire. She did this not just to me but to us. And that weight, that was hers to carry. I leaned back and sat down on the edge of my couch, the text still glowing on my phone. Please just open the door. It wasn't the first time she'd reached out. A few weeks ago, she sent a message asking if I'd be open to a conversation, followed by some vague apology. I ignored it. Then came the LinkedIn notification. She viewed my profile. She even liked a comment I left on someone else's post, which was about as subtle as a car alarm at midnight. I figured it was just regret creeping in. But this showing up at my place unannounced, crying at my gate, this was different. I stood and walked toward the front of the apartment, peeking through the curtain again. She was out of the car now, leaning against the hood, arms crossed tightly like she was trying to hold herself together. From this distance, I could just make out the mascara trails under her eyes. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at it, didn't answer, and shoved it in her pocket. That was when the doorbell rang. I didn't flinch. I just stood there. She'd been buzzed in once before. Back when this place had our name on the lease. Back when we thought furniture and coffee mugs meant permanence. But now I had one name on everything and hers wasn't it. The intercom buzzed again. Jason. Her voice cracked through the speaker. Please just give me 5 minutes. Silence. I know I don't deserve it, but I don't know who else to turn to. I could hear her breathing. It wasn't a performance anymore. This wasn't champagne-popping Vanessa. This was something raw, cracked, and small. The woman who used to command a room now sounded like she couldn't fill a whisper. I didn't answer. She didn't press it again. I watched her sit down on the cold stone step of the gate, hugging her knees like a child. She stayed like that for a long time. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. I went back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and tried not to think too much. But my mind kept going back to that night 6 months ago. The moment she handed me the divorce papers wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was that look in her eyes. Not cruelty, not guilt, just indifference. Like I was already filed away in her mental storage and she'd moved on to shinier things. But now she was the one left in the cold. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa. Brandon left. Took everything. He said I was too much drama. My friends won't answer. My sister told me I got what I deserved. She laughed. I stared at the message. Slowly, the words sank in. So Brandon was gone. The guy she left me for had bailed. Classic. These men who chase the thrill, they rarely stay for the reality. And Vanessa, she'd bet on the wrong horse again. But part of me wondered if this was really about me or just about convenience. Did she regret losing me or did she just miss the life I gave her? The safety, the steadiness, the man who held her hair back when she was sick, who fixed the sink without being asked, who remembered anniversaries when she couldn't be bothered to look at a calendar. I opened the text thread, typed 3 words, then deleted them. I wasn't ready to reply. Not yet. Instead, I walked out onto the balcony. She looked up when she saw movement. Her eyes went wide, hopeful. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I just stared back. She stood, brushing herself off like she didn't want to seem weak. Even from up here, I could see the way she tugged her coat tighter like that could somehow shield her from the cold truth of what she'd done. Then she called out, Jason. Her voice cracked. I don't care if you hate me. I needed to say I'm sorry to your face. I leaned on the railing, arms crossed. I didn't say a word. She took a few hesitant steps toward the front door, not past the gate, just far enough that she could see me clearly. You didn't deserve what I did. None of it. I thought I was chasing something better, but I didn't realize you were the better. You always were. I kept my face still. I let people laugh at you. I let them treat you like a joke. And I stood there while you walked away. I didn't stop you because I thought I'd already won. But I lost more than I understood. I turned and walked back inside, not slamming the door, not storming away, just leaving. And I left her standing there alone with her words. I sat on the couch and stared at the necklace I never gave her. Still tucked in its box, still engraved with the coordinates of where we met. I should have thrown it out months ago, but some part of me held on. Not for her, for the man I used to be, and maybe for the man I am now. I looked at the gate camera feed. She was still standing there, waiting. But this time, I was the one holding the pen. And what I write next, that's where the real story begins. I stayed on the couch for a long time, watching her on the gate cam. She didn't yell, she didn't plead. She just stood there like someone trying to outwait a storm. And part of me wondered if that was her strategy all along. Endure just long enough until I cracked. But she didn't know me anymore. She didn't know how far gone I was from the man who used to bend over backwards for her. Who used to ask what he did wrong every time she hurt him. The man who used to apologize just to keep the peace. Who thought love meant sacrifice without limit. That man, he died the night she handed me those papers like a hostess handing out party favors. Still, I won't pretend it was easy. Watching her shiver outside my gate felt like trying to ignore an open wound. There was a time I would have wrapped my arms around her without hesitation, no matter how badly she'd hurt me. But time has a way of hardening people, of turning love into a bruise you keep poking just to make sure it still hurts. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa, I'm not here to get anything from you. I just needed you to see me, to know I'm not pretending anymore. I didn't respond, but I read it again and again until I found myself standing by the door, fingers brushing the handle like muscle memory was stronger than logic. I cracked the door just enough to feel the air slip through. It was cold, and it carried something sharp with it. Maybe truth, maybe finality. I didn't let her in, but I stepped out. She turned immediately when she heard the door, her breath hitching. Jason, she said softly. Like my name was something fragile she hadn't dared speak aloud in months. I didn't speak. I just stood there, hands in my coat pockets, staring at her through the bars of the gate like she was a ghost. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, the kind she used to wear on Sundays when we'd stay in and make pancakes. But she wasn't that woman anymore, and I wasn't that man. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling, for at least letting me see you. I raised an eyebrow. Why are you here, Vanessa? Really? She hesitated. Because everything I thought I wanted turned out to be hollow. Brandon was exciting. Sure. But he didn't know how to love anyone but himself. And my friends, they were only ever around when I had something to offer. And when I didn't, they vanished. That's unfortunate, I said, my tone flat, but there was something bitter clawing its way up my throat. Sounds like a rough wake-up call. She took a breath, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. It is, and I'm not asking for anything. I know I don't have the right. I just wanted you to know that you weren't the problem. You were the best part of my life, and I was too blind to see it. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, to sit with it like I had to sit with the quiet after she left. The mornings I woke up to an empty bed. The nights I couldn't sleep because every room in the house echoed with absence. 6 months ago, I said slowly, you humiliated me in front of everyone you knew. You clapped. Your family toasted. Your uncle took photos like it was a red carpet event. Do you have any idea what that did to me? She nodded, tears filling her eyes again. I was cruel. I know. No, cruel is easy to forgive. That was calculated. You choreographed it like it was a performance and I was just a prop you needed to dispose of. She flinched and for a moment I almost felt bad. Almost. I'm not here to rewrite history, she whispered. I needed to tell you face to face that I regret it. All of it. Losing you. It gutted me in ways I didn't expect. I stared at her and for a flicker of a second I saw the woman I married. Not the one who handed me papers. Not the one who laughed at my expense, but the girl I met in college who stayed up late helping me study for lecture exams. Who kissed me in grocery store aisles when she thought no one was watching. But nostalgia is a liar. It shows you the good through a filter and erases the parts that should warn you. I stepped forward, closer to the gate. You don't get to come back because things didn't work out with Brandon. I'm not. I held up a hand. Let me finish. She closed her mouth and nodded. I loved you truly. And for a long time I thought that meant I was supposed to take whatever you gave me, no matter how little it was. But you know what I realized? Love isn't just about giving. It's about being respected. And that night at your parents' place, you didn't just take off the ring. You tore apart everything we'd built. Her shoulders sagged. She looked down. And now, I continued, voice steady. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. And I can't let someone back in who saw me as disposable. She didn't argue, didn't fight. She just whispered, I understand. I waited, watching her. She took a deep breath and stepped back toward her car. And that's when she said it, soft, almost inaudible. I just wanted to see the man I gave up one more time. I didn't respond. She got in the car, sat there for a minute, then slowly pulled away, tail lights fading into the night. I stood there long after the sound of her engine disappeared, hands still in my pockets, heart still heavy, but not broken. Not anymore. And as the gate closed behind her, something inside me did, too. But what she left behind, that was just starting to open. I watched her car disappear down the road, her headlights flickering out like the last ember of a fire I'd kept alive too long. For a moment, the night was still, so still. I could hear the wind moving through the trees like it was exhaling for me. Then the gate clicked shut. And with that, I turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood in the silence of my apartment, letting it wrap around me. It didn't feel empty anymore. Felt mine. The next morning, I woke up early and made myself coffee. Just one mug, black, the way I liked it before she started buying those flavored creamers and cinnamon syrups. I took it out to the balcony, watching the city slowly come to life below me. There was peace in that moment. No noise, no begging texts, just the quiet hum of traffic, the warmth of a new day, and the awareness that I had made it to the other side. I half expected her to text again, to say something desperate, but she didn't. Maybe because she finally understood, or maybe because she knew there was nothing left to say. A week passed, then two, and just like that, she vanished from my life again. Only this time it was because I closed the door for good. Then something strange happened. I started getting messages from her family. Her sister, the same one who clapped when Vanessa handed me those papers. She'd messaged me on Instagram. Hey, I know this is random, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how that night went down. I didn't know she was going to humiliate you like that. I thought it was just a weird divorce party joke. I wasn't clapping for you getting hurt. I was clapping because, well, I didn't know what else to do. You didn't deserve any of it. I stared at the message, reread it twice, and deleted it without replying. Not out of spite, just because I didn't need their guilt. That was their problem to sit with now. Then her mom emailed me. She had the nerve to say she regretted celebrating something so personal and asked if I'd be willing to talk to Vanessa just once more, because she hadn't been the same since I walked away from her that night at the gate. That one, I did reply. Thank you for your message. But I think it's time Vanessa leans on the people who cheered when she tore me down. I won't be part of her recovery arc. I hit send and blocked the email. That felt good because the thing is, I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't hate Vanessa. I just saw her clearly. And sometimes clarity is more powerful than rage. Rage burns out. Clarity sticks. The real ending, though, that came a few months later. I was at a small business mixer downtown hosted on the rooftop of a fancy co-working space. One of those events with string lights, overpriced cocktails, and a DJ who played music way too loud for anyone to actually network. I was there because a new firm was courting me, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to meet their team in person. That's when I saw her. Not Vanessa. Bridget. Bridget was one of the mutual friends who'd quietly disappeared during the divorce drama. We hadn't talked since, and I didn't blame her. She was always closer to Vanessa, but she walked over, drink in hand, and smiled. Jason, she asked, tilting her head like she wasn't quite sure if it was me. I nodded. Hey, Bridget. You look... She glanced me over, eyes widening a bit. You look good. Thanks. You too. We chatted. Nothing heavy. Work, weather, music, travel. And just when I thought she was going to bring her up, Bridget surprised me. You know, she said, I always wondered how you stayed so calm that night. If it had been me, I think I would have flipped the table. I smirked. Trust me, I thought about it. She laughed, but then her face softened. Vanessa's a mess now. She keeps talking about you. Says she lost the only person who ever made her feel safe. I don't think she even understands why she did it. Maybe she thought someone flashier would make her feel more valuable. She didn't need someone flashy, I said. She needed therapy. Bridget nearly spit out her drink, laughing. Okay, that was good. We ended up talking for over an hour. She was sharp, funny, grounded, and completely uninterested in dragging Vanessa into the conversation again, which I appreciated a lot. We exchanged numbers not in that forced we should catch up sometime way, but because it felt easy, like the start of something that wasn't trying to fix the past. Just move forward. That night, as I got home, I passed by the drawer where I'd kept Vanessa's necklace. I opened it for the first time in months. The box was still there. I picked it up, opened it, and stared at the engraved coordinates. The cafe where we met. The stupid little cafe where she tripped over my chair and spilled her latte. We laughed. We talked for hours. It had meant something once, but now it was just a pin on a map that led to nowhere. So I closed the box and I walked it straight to the trash chute in the hallway. The clang of the metal lid slamming shut echoed like punctuation. The final period on a chapter I'd let run on far too long. A few weeks later, I went on a date with Bridget. Then another. Then a weekend trip. Then a quiet night on my couch watching old movies and laughing at how bad our pizza order was. And the whole time I didn't think about Vanessa once. Not when Bridget held my hand. Not when she leaned into me during a horror movie. Not even when she accidentally knocked over my favorite mug and apologized 100 times while trying to clean it up with the sleeve of her hoodie. Because this, whatever it was, felt nothing like before. Felt new, honest, simple. And maybe that's what real love is supposed to feel like. Not fireworks and grand gestures, but quiet safety. The kind that doesn't need applause or champagne or an audience. The kind that stays. Months passed. Life moved on. I moved on. And Vanessa, the last I heard, she moved in with a cousin, tried to rebuild. Maybe she's healing. Maybe she's still chasing upgrades. But she won't find what she had with me because what we had. She handed it away, smiling while people cheered. And me, I didn't just walk away. I walked forward. And I never looked back. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My name's Darren. I'm 34 and I haven't been part of the family in a long time, at least not in the way they define it. To them, I'm the quiet one, the background guy. Not flashy, not loud, not sentimental, just present, always present. The one who helps out when needed, but never makes a fuss. The one who writes the checks when there's an emergency, fixes the messes no one talks about, and somehow still ends up the one they ignore at birthdays and weddings. My mom says I'm too private. My brother calls me boring. My dad, he used to call me practical, but that tone has changed over the years. Now he just says I don't have the spark. And somewhere along the way, they convinced themselves I was just another piece in their picture-perfect family portrait. Necessary, maybe, but never central. Not like my brother Kevin. Kevin is 2 years younger than me and has been the golden child since he was in diapers. I'm not even bitter about it anymore. It just is what it is. He was the one my mom bragged about at book club. The one my dad trained to take over the business. Even though I was the one working behind the scenes since college, managing the accounts, the legal side, the licensing, everything, Kevin couldn't read a quarterly report if it was printed in cartoon font. But he knew how to charm a room. And to my family, that was what mattered. He was the face. I was the guy behind the curtain making sure the lights stayed on. I never argued. Not once. Not when Dad gave Kevin a company car I'd leased under my name. Not when Mom told neighbors that Kevin had really turned things around at the business after I'd quietly fixed a massive IRS issue 2 years ago. Not even when Kevin started calling himself CEO, despite the fact that the business has legally been mine since Dad signed it over, thinking it was just for taxes. I smiled. I nodded. I made sure payroll didn't bounce and that everyone else could keep pretending. It wasn't about ego. Honestly, I didn't care about the title or the credit. I just didn't want to see the whole thing fall apart. Dad built the company from nothing. And even if he never acknowledged my role, I wasn't going to let it collapse. It was supposed to be temporary, a legal technicality. After Dad's back surgery, When we had to shift things around for liability reasons, he handed over ownership to me without really looking at the paperwork. I figured we'd revisit it later, but later never came. Instead, Dad started acting like he was back in charge, ignoring every update I sent him. Kevin stopped showing up entirely, except when he needed to schmooze with a client or impress a girlfriend. And my mom, she just kept reminding me that Kevin is the future of this family. Every dinner, every phone call, as if I was the past, as if I hadn't kept them all afloat, including the mortgage on the very house we all gathered in last week for Dad's 60th birthday. That house. God, that house. It used to be my childhood home, but my parents sold it 10 years ago when things got tight. Then 2 years later, after Kevin blew through the money they made from the sale and begged for help, I bought it back quietly under my LLC. Let them move in. Let them believe some miracle investor had given them a sweetheart deal. They never asked questions, just moved in like it was owed to them. Mom even had the nerve to call it our house in front of her friends last Christmas while I was the one shoveling the snow outside. So, when Dad's big birthday bash rolled around, I already had a knot in my stomach. Not because I didn't want to celebrate him, but because I knew exactly how the night was going to go. I knew the speech would come. I just didn't know how far he'd take it. The house was full of extended family and friends I hadn't seen in years. Kevin stood at the center of it all, holding court like he always did, laughing too loudly, telling stories that somehow made him the hero every time. My mom flitted from guest to guest, bragging about the imported food, the wine, the caterers, all of which I'd paid for through my company. Dad sat in the living room like a king on a throne, wearing a new watch I'd sent anonymously a month before. He never even asked who it was from. Probably assumed it was Kevin. I kept mostly to the edge of the room, played the role, the quiet son, the background guy. I didn't even get introduced to half the guests. One woman asked me if I was Kevin's assistant. I smiled and said, something like that. Then came the toast. It started normal enough. A few jokes, some warm memories. People clapped and laughed. Kevin stood beside him, arms slung over his shoulder, basking in the attention like it was his birthday. Then Dad raised his glass a little higher and the room got quiet. Everything you see here, he said, voice loud and clear, exists because of me. The house, the business, the cars, this family. There were polite nods. Then he added, and when I'm gone, it all goes to Kevin. He's earned it. The silence after that was louder than anything. Kevin grinned. Mom gave a little smirk. And I just sat there still like a statue carved from disbelief. Not anger, just an ache. Familiar, dull, and now sharpened to a point. I looked at my dad, really looked at him, and I realized he wasn't trying to be cruel. He just genuinely believed it. In his mind, none of this could exist without him. Not even the things I'd built in his name. In his eyes, I was just the help. That was the moment it all crystallized for me. All the little slights, the ignored emails, the unchecked receipts, the way Kevin had parked his company car diagonally on the lawn like he owned the place. They didn't just take me for granted, they erased me. They'd rewritten the story entirely, cast me as an extra in my own life. But I didn't react. Not then. I smiled. I lifted my glass and I toasted with the rest of them because the moment wasn't about arguing. It was about revealing. So, after the cake had been cut and the guests started filing out, I walked upstairs to the guest room where I'd been staying for the weekend. I grabbed the black folder I'd tucked into my bag the night before. A simple leather case with neatly tabbed documents, deeds, registrations, ownership records, signatures. I brought it downstairs, and without a word, I set it gently on the dining table right beside the half-empty champagne flutes and the forgotten birthday cards. The label on the folder was simple, updated ownership records. Then I walked out the front door without saying a word, and I waited. I didn't go far. Just around the corner, actually. There's a quiet park bench at the end of the cul-de-sac, half hidden by an overgrown hedge where I used to sit with my headphones after school. I hadn't been there in years, but I remembered every crack in the pavement. I sat down, let the cool night air settle over me, and pulled out my phone. I wasn't watching them exactly, but I was waiting. I knew what I'd left behind. I knew the weight of that folder and the silence it would detonate the moment someone opened it. 15 minutes later, the text came from Kevin. "What is this?" "Dad's freaking out." I didn't reply. I just watched the typing dots come and go. Then came another one. "Tell me this is a joke." Then the call. I let it ring out. Then another one from Mom. I let that one ring too. The thing is, they never asked. That's what always stuck with me. Not once in all these years did they ever stop and ask how the bills got paid or who signed the checks or why the mortgage company had a different mailing address. They didn't want to know. They just liked the illusion. And I'd kept it intact for longer than I should have. I stayed out there until the porch lights flicked off one by one, until the house, my house, quieted down. By the time I came back in, the folder was gone from the table. Dad was in the kitchen leaning over the counter with both hands pressed flat like he needed it to hold him up. He didn't look at me when I walked in. Neither did Mom, who was sitting at the island, clutching a cup of untouched tea like it was the only thing tethering her to the floor. Kevin came storming out of the hallway, folder in hand, papers spilling from the sides like it had already been rifled through by frantic fingers. "You think this is funny?" he said, voice sharp. I didn't answer, just looked at him. "You can't do this," he snapped, waving the folder like a weapon. This is ours. This house, this business, everything. You don't get to just rewrite history." I walked past him and poured myself a glass of water. Took my time. "I didn't rewrite anything," I said. "I just filed it properly." He opened his mouth to speak, but Dad cut in from the kitchen, voice low, heavy. "Is it true?" I turned to face him. His hands were still braced on the counter. His eyes hadn't moved. "Yes," I said. "The house, the business, the cars, everything Kevin's been showing off like a prize. They're mine, registered, owned, maintained by me." Mom finally spoke. "But why?" I blinked at her. "Why?" I echoed. "Because no one else could. When the IRS came knocking, when the accounts were frozen, when Kevin maxed out 3 company credit cards in a month. Who fixed it? Who paid off the vendors so you could keep hosting brunches like nothing happened? Who signed the refinancing papers on this place when your credit score didn't qualify you for a loan?" Mom's lip trembled, but I wasn't angry. I was done being angry. I was just exhausted. "You didn't even ask," I said quietly. "You just assumed I'd keep showing up, keep cleaning up, keep disappearing into the background." Dad finally looked at me, really looked. "Why didn't you tell us?" That made me laugh. Not loudly. Just one of those bitter little exhales that happens when something sad finally becomes funny. "Tell you," I said. "The last time I tried to explain something, Kevin interrupted me to take credit for the last quarter's numbers, the ones I personally reconciled. You gave him a bottle of scotch. You told me to take notes." Kevin turned red. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's not," he sputtered. "You think this makes you better than us? You think this folder makes you the boss?" I took a step closer, calm, measured. "No," I said. "It just makes me the owner." And in that silence, for the first time in my entire life, I watched my father blink like he was seeing me for the first time. Kevin dropped the folder onto the floor and stormed off. Mom called after him, but her voice cracked halfway through. Dad sat down at the kitchen table like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. And I walked over to the fireplace, picked up the old family photo Mom loved to keep there, the one from Kevin's college graduation. I wasn't in it. I'd been the one taking the picture. I set it face down on the mantel. Then I turned to my parents and said quietly, "There's one more thing I wanted to let you know." I paused, let the weight of the moment sit, but before I could speak, the door behind me burst open, and there he was, Kevin. Kevin's face was flushed, his hair disheveled like he'd yanked at it all the way down the hallway. He was holding his laptop open, the screen still glowing. He didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes locked on me like I just pulled the rug out from under his whole life. And maybe in a way I had, but I wasn't ready for what he said next. "You revoked my access," he breathed. "To everything." I didn't respond, just waited. The CRM system, the payroll dashboard, the company email. He looked down at the laptop and back at me. It's all gone. My login doesn't work. My phone's been blowing up. I've got 15 employees asking why their accounts are frozen. He stepped forward, voice rising. What did you do, Darren? I set my glass down on the counter, the sound of it tapping the granite louder than anything else in the room. I took back what was mine, I said. You can't just lock me out of my job. It's not your job, I said. It never was. He looked stunned for a moment, like he'd just been punched in the stomach. You're joking, right? This is some kind of punishment. No, I said. This is me correcting a mistake. You were the mistake, he spat. You were never supposed to be part of this. You were always just the background guy. Dad trained me. This company was always going to be mine. You think you can just swoop in and take it because you paid a few bills? My father flinched. A few bills. I repeated slowly. Kevin, you were this close to being sued for breach of contract twice. You didn't even know we had to carry liability insurance until I put you on a call with the lawyer. You've been playing CEO on social media while I've been running the company from behind the scenes. If anything, I gave you too much access. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. And let me be very clear, I didn't revoke anything tonight. Your access was set to expire 2 weeks ago when you stopped showing up to Monday calls and started charging spa weekends to the business account. He looked to Dad for backup. Tell him, Kevin said. Tell him this is insane. But Dad didn't say a word. Not yet. He just sat there, eyes flicking between us like he was watching a tennis match he didn't buy tickets for. I'm not shutting down the business, I added, more to Dad than to Kevin. I'm just shutting you out permanently. Over what? Kevin shouted. Because I got a little recognition for once? Recognition, I repeated. Kevin, you gave a speech at last quarter's meeting thanking yourself for increased profits that came directly from a software automation tool I spent 3 months building. You don't even know the name of half our vendors. You used to forward contract requests to Mom to print for you because you couldn't figure out how to sign a PDF. That's not true. Go check your sent folder. Kevin was breathing hard, fists clenched, jaw tight. He looked at me like he didn't even recognize the person standing in front of him. But that's because he didn't. None of them did. They didn't know I'd stayed up for weeks fixing a malware breach that Kevin had caused by downloading pirated music on the company laptop. They didn't know I'd paid for the roof after the storm last year, or that the reason the accountant never called back was because I was the accountant. They didn't know anything because I never told them, because I thought keeping the peace was more important than being seen. And maybe for a while it was, but not anymore. Mom finally spoke again, her voice shaking. Sweetheart, maybe we misunderstood. No, I said. You didn't misunderstand. You just didn't care to know. You all liked having a scapegoat when things went wrong and a shadow when things went right. Dad stood up then slowly, not angrily, just like he was realizing how deep the ground had shifted under his feet. So what now? He asked. I met his eyes. Now you live in a house I own. You drive a car registered under my LLC. The business you keep bragging about is mine. And if you want to keep pretending that Kevin earned any of this, I suggest you take a good look at those documents I left on the table. He looked down, jaw tight. I never meant to insult you, Darren. I just thought Kevin would carry the torch. I nodded. He can't carry a torch if he doesn't know where the matches are. The room was dead quiet until Kevin's voice cut through again. Lower this time, more desperate. You can't just erase me. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt or resentment or even anger. I just felt done. I didn't erase you, Kevin, I said quietly. You did that all on your own. And then Dad's phone lit up on the counter. A new email notification from the legal team. Subject line, formal transfer of executive authority. Confirmation attached. He reached for it, opened it, read it, and his eyes widened. He looked up at me, mouth half open. Darren, this isn't just the company. I nodded. No, it's everything. And that's when the front door suddenly swung open again. I turned. It was Uncle Richard with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Richard wasn't the dramatic type. He was my dad's older brother, retired, calm, the kind of guy who brought his own folding chair to barbecues and read contracts like they were bedtime stories. I hadn't seen him all night, and I wasn't expecting to see him now, let alone walk through the front door uninvited with a manila envelope clutched in one hand and a grim look on his face. He looked around the room slowly at Kevin still clutching his laptop, at my dad sitting pale and stiff behind the kitchen island, at me standing there like I just set off a bomb. He walked over without a word, laid the envelope flat on the counter and said, "I thought I'd let you know in person before the rest of the board finds out in the morning." Dad blinked. "The board?" Uncle Richard nodded. "You remember the quarterly review we postponed? I just got off the phone with the advisory committee." "What are you talking about?" Kevin asked, voice cracking. Uncle Richard turned to me, then gave me a slow, measured nod. A gesture I hadn't seen from anyone in this family in a long time. Not respect, not pity, just recognition. "Darren submitted the full audit you asked me to keep confidential," he said to Dad. I didn't want to believe it at first. I really didn't, but it checks out. Every transfer, every invoice, every asset shift. He didn't hide a thing. He tapped the envelope. "This is a copy of what's going out to the rest of the shareholders tomorrow." My dad's hand hovered over the envelope like it burned to the touch. I didn't ask for an audit." "No," I said. "But the bylaws you wrote in 1993 let any majority shareholder request one if they feel there's been financial misrepresentation, which as of last month I am." Dad turned to Richard in disbelief. "You let him do this?" Richard shook his head. "No, you did. You signed over 71% of company equity to Darren 5 years ago when he refinanced your buyout plan. You just didn't bother reading the clauses. You assumed he was cleaning up your books out of loyalty. I didn't flinch and I was. But loyalty doesn't mean silence forever." Kevin looked like he'd been punched in the chest. "You're lying." "No," Richard said, voice flat. "He's not." Silence. My mom looked between us all, eyes filling with tears, not from understanding, but from the sudden, painful realization that the world she'd constructed around her golden boy and her untouchable husband was collapsing from the inside out. "You were always so quiet," she whispered like it was an accusation. I turned to her. "Maybe if someone had listened when I wasn't." She looked away. Dad finally tore open the envelope, scanned the papers inside. I watched the color drain from his face as he reached page after page. Tax filings, asset declarations, legal filings, even the board memo Richard had already prepared. Every page was a brick in the wall I'd spent years building in silence, stone by stone, while they all thought I was just helping out. Kevin leaned against the wall like he might slide down it. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said. "I'm cleaning it up. You can't just take everything from us." "I didn't take anything. You handed it to me because none of you paid attention. You just assumed I was happy being invisible. And maybe I was. But invisible doesn't mean incompetent." Kevin stepped forward, desperate now. Okay. Look, I messed up. I'll fix it. Okay. You want me out of the company? Fine. I'll leave. Just don't take the house. Don't leave Mom and Dad with nothing." I studied him. There it was. The switch, the plea, the fear. "Do you know how many years I stayed silent because of that?" I said quietly. "Because I didn't want to leave them with nothing." I looked at my father. You could have sat me down at any point, asked me what I was doing, what I needed, what I wanted. He didn't respond. He just looked small, not angry, not proud, just small. "You said this all exists because of you," I said. "But if that were true, it would be gone by now." Uncle Richard cleared his throat. "The board's reviewing a proposal Darren submitted. He's restructuring everything, dissolving old debts, shifting assets. He's even offering early retirement packages to long-term staff." Dad's eyes shot up. "You're firing my people?" "No," I said. "I'm giving them a choice. Stay and get paid better or leave with full pension and a bonus. Unlike Kevin, I don't believe in milking loyalty dry." Richard added, "You should be thankful. Really, If Darren hadn't stepped in when he did, the company would have collapsed 2 years ago. You'd be in bankruptcy court and Kevin would be live streaming your foreclosure. That finally hit home. Mom gasped softly. Kevin sank into a chair. I'm not evicting anyone, I said. The house stays in the family. Technically, you can live here for as long as you want, rent-free, but it's not yours. It never was. And the business? Dad asked quietly. I'll keep running it, I said. Properly, legally, profitably. But it won't be under the family name anymore. That name doesn't mean what it used to. I walked to the mantel and picked up the family photo I'd flipped earlier. Turned it back over, looked at it for a long moment. I used to think I had to earn a place in this picture, I said. But I realized something. I was always in the frame. You just cropped me out. Dad swallowed hard. Kevin didn't look up. Mom started to cry and I felt nothing but peace. Not smugness, not victory, just relief. Like I'd finally dropped the weight I'd been carrying since I was a teenager. The weight of silence, of being useful but never valued. Trusted but never respected. I turned to Uncle Richard. Thank you for backing me. He smiled slightly. You didn't need my backing, Darren. You just needed to stop hiding. I nodded. Then I walked toward the front door, grabbing my overnight bag on the way. Kevin stood suddenly. Where are you going? Home, I said. To my other house. You're leaving? After all this? I didn't do this to stay. I did this to fix it. He opened his mouth again, but I raised a hand. One more thing, I said. The new HR policies go into effect Monday. You're no longer allowed to charge personal expenses to the business. And I've reassigned your title. To what? He asked bitterly. I looked him in the eye. To unemployed. His mouth dropped open. I turned, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. The night was cool, quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't a shadow walking behind someone else's spotlight. I was just me. Not the disappointment, not the wallet, not the invisible one, just Darren. And I was finally free. Now on to the next story. Story 7. At my mom's birthday, my brother's son threw my son's drawing into the fire and yelled, "Nobody wants his crappy art anyway." Everyone laughed. That night, my dad texted, "You're making things uncomfortable. Just skip Christmas." I replied, "So does the funding." By 1 a.m., my phone was melting. 27 missed calls. It wasn't pretty at all from their side. My mom's 70th birthday was supposed to be a celebration, but from the moment Jamie and I walked into their house, I could feel it. That strange shift in energy, like we were background noise in our own family. They were all there already. My sister Trish, her husband, their kids, my parents, everyone smiling too wide, drinking too fast, talking too loud. I knew that kind of energy. It wasn't warmth. It was tension wrapped in party balloons. Jamie had brought a drawing he'd worked on for days. A forest scene with tiny deer under a sky full of stars. He'd even used glitter, which he normally hated, just because he said Grandma might like it. I didn't tell him she wouldn't care. He handed it to her with both hands. She barely glanced at it before putting it down like it was junk mail. She didn't even say anything. I was already holding my breath when it happened. Caleb, Trish's 12-year-old, picked up the drawing, looked at it for 2 seconds, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the fireplace. The flames took it fast. Then he yelled loud enough for everyone to hear, "Nobody wants his crappy art anyway." And then the laughter started. Not from the kids, from the adults. My mother, who was supposed to be the reason we were all there, laughed first. Trish was wiping tears from her eyes like it was the best joke she'd ever heard. Even my dad chuckled. No one said a word to Caleb. Jamie just stood there. I think he thought it was part of the party at first. Then he looked at me and he got it. I didn't say a word. I grabbed our coats, told him to put on his shoes, and we left. No dramatic exit, just gone. Later that night, around 9:30, while Jamie was brushing his teeth, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. "You're making things uncomfortable. Just skip Christmas." I stared at it for a second and typed back, "So does the funding." I meant it. For the past few years, I'd been quietly sending my parents $3,000 every December. It started when my business took off and they mentioned they were having a hard time covering Christmas. I never made a big deal of it. It was family. But this time, I logged in and shut down the joint account we used. By 1 a.m., my phone was a war zone. 27 missed calls. Messages from my mom, my sister, even my dad. Everything from, "How could you," to "He's just a kid," to "You're blowing this out of proportion." I didn't respond, but they weren't done. The next morning, I was in the kitchen making pancakes when I heard the front door open. I hadn't even realized I forgot to lock it. My parents walked in uninvited. Trish right behind them. They didn't come to apologize. They came to argue. My mom started in about how disappointed she was. My dad talked about how money shouldn't come with strings. Trish said I was teaching Jamie to be weak. I told them to get out. They ignored me. Then Caleb pushed past me again, going straight toward Jamie, said something about the drawing. Jamie backed up fast, slipped on the rug, and hit the floor hard. It was his elbow, scraped and bleeding. He tried not to cry, but I could see the tears. That was it. I turned to them and told them to get out. All of them, right now. They tried to spin it. Said it wasn't intentional. Said it was an accident. Said Caleb was just being playful. I didn't care. I shut the door behind them and locked it. That was the beginning. I thought it was over when I locked the door behind them. But apparently, in my family, being told to leave someone's home after your grandson gets shoved and your daughter says she's done still isn't enough to register as serious. It started the next morning. Text from my mom. The kind that read more like damage control than actual concern. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. We were all just joking around. Gloria, don't take everything so personally." And then the real kicker, Jamie needs to toughen up. Life's not always nice. Not a word about what Caleb did. Not a word about the drawing. Nothing about Jamie getting hurt. Excuses. Deflection. A small boy's feelings bulldozed under the weight of a birthday party and a trip they assumed I'd still be paying for. By noon, Trish joined in. Her texts were straight-up attacks. "You're being dramatic again. You're going to ruin Christmas over a piece of paper. Mom's heartbroken. Dad's sick over it. And your little art prodigy will live." That last one nearly made me throw my phone. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I already had that account. The joint one I used to send $3,000 every December was empty. I closed it the night Jamie's drawing turned to ash in my parents' fireplace. They hadn't believed I would. Now they did. By evening, my phone was lighting up nonstop. Missed calls from my mom, my dad, 2 from Trish's husband, and 1 random number I didn't recognize. I let every single one go to voicemail. I was sitting with Jamie helping him organize his art supplies when the first voicemail came through. It was my dad. His voice was tight, controlled, like he was trying not to sound as panicked as he clearly was. He said he heard the account was closed and wanted to make sure it wasn't permanent. Said they'd already paid for the Christmas trip. Non-refundable. The kids were excited. They bought ski gear. The resort was already charging late fees. Then came the quiet line at the end. "We really counted on you this year." I didn't reply. They counted on me. That's the part that stuck. Not, "We're sorry." Not, "We messed up." Just, "We expected you to keep paying even if we treat your son like garbage." That night they came back. My parents. This time they knocked. Jamie was upstairs drawing. So I opened the door just enough to see both of them standing there in their coats looking like they'd aged 10 years in 2 days. My dad opened with, "We just want to talk." My mom followed with, "We didn't realize how upset you were." I let them in, mostly because I wanted to hear what version of the story they were telling themselves. It wasn't an apology, not even close. They said they were sorry if I felt hurt, that maybe the joke went too far, but it was all said with this undertone of, "Let's just move past this and get back to how things were." Like they were here to smooth things over just enough to still go on their Christmas trip. Then came the question, "Can you just help us this one last time?" I asked flatly if they had talked to Caleb, if anyone had told him that what he did was wrong. They looked at each other. My mom said they didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He was just being a kid. She actually said, "We didn't want to make him feel guilty over something silly. That was it." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain anything. I opened the door and told them they had 5 seconds to leave. They did. That night, I sat next to Jamie while he sketched another version of the drawing that had gone up in flames. This one had no stars, just trees. A little boy standing alone at the edge of them. No one else in sight. He didn't say much, but he didn't have to. I knew right then they didn't just lose the money. They were about to lose something far more permanent. And the worst part was they had no idea it had already started. The ski trip was dead. That became official a few days before Christmas, though no one said it to my face. I found out through Trisha's Instagram story, a photo of her sadly looking dining room centerpiece with the caption, "Plan B Christmas, thanks for nothing." It was petty, predictable, but also weirdly satisfying. Jamie and I spent that week tucked into our own world. We baked cookies, hung paper snowflakes around the house, even made handmade ornaments out of salt dough. No glitter this time. Jamie didn't want any. He said it reminded him of the drawing. I didn't push. We weren't pretending things were fine, but they were peaceful, quiet. For once, it was just about us, not damage control or tiptoeing around someone else's mood swings. On Christmas Eve, my mom called. Her tone was bright, like none of it had happened. They were hosting dinner at home now, just a small gathering. My parents, Trish, and her family, a few neighbors. She said Jamie should come see his cousin's open presents. Said maybe it was time to let go of the tension and put things in the past. I didn't say yes at first. I told her I'd think about it. I wanted to protect Jamie. I didn't trust them, but he overheard the call and asked if we could go. Said he missed Grandma. Said maybe everyone would be nicer this time. I gave in. We arrived around 6 o'clock. The house was decorated just like always. Over-the-top lights, ceramic reindeer on the porch, Bing Crosby playing from a Bluetooth speaker by the door. My mom opened it like we were long-lost guests, smiling too much. She hugged Jamie and said how glad she was. We came inside. Nothing felt different. Trish was in the kitchen barking orders. Her husband was drinking something brown and strong. And Caleb was on the couch with his phone, headphones in. He didn't even look up when Jamie walked in. We sat down for dinner around 7. It was quiet at first. Everyone pretending to be civilized. Jamie sat next to me pushing mashed potatoes around his plate. My mom brought out the good china. I remember thinking, funny how they only bring out the nice things when they want to look like good people. Halfway through dinner, my dad gave a little speech. Talked about how proud he was of the family, how important forgiveness was. Everyone nodded along like we were in a commercial. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Trish leaned across the table, smiling just a little too wide, and said, "Let's just hope no one throws a tantrum over paper this time." Silence, then laughter, soft at first, then louder. My mom laughed. Her husband did that quiet chuckle he always does when he doesn't know if something is funny, but doesn't want to be left out. Even my dad smiled. I looked at Jamie. He wasn't confused this time. He understood exactly what she meant. He looked down at his plate. I stood up, picked up the porcelain plate in front of me, one of my mother's precious antiques she always bragged about, and let it slip from my hand. It shattered across the hardwood. The room went dead silent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say a word. I just reached for Jamie's hand and walked us out. We didn't put on our coats. We didn't say goodbye. We got into the car and drove. Jamie didn't speak for a while. Then he asked quietly if I was mad at him, if he did something wrong. I told him no, that I was proud of him, that none of this was his fault. We got home and curled up on the couch, the tree lights still blinking, the air smelling like cinnamon and flour. I made us hot chocolate and let him fall asleep watching a movie. I was just starting to drift off too when there was a knock at the door. I didn't expect anyone. Then I saw the flashing lights through the window. A police car parked in front of my house. I opened the door. The officer asked if everything was okay. Said they'd received a call about a family dispute, destruction of property. Said someone reported I'd broken things in anger and stormed out of a family gathering. I told him exactly what happened, that I'd broken one plate, my own mother's, in a house where my son was mocked again, that we left quietly, that nothing and no one was damaged beyond repair except maybe whatever shred of decency my family had left. The officer looked embarrassed, said he understood, left within minutes. That's when it hit me. They hadn't called the cops because they were scared. They weren't afraid of me. They were trying to make a point, trying to punish me for standing up for Jamie, for walking away, for cutting off their funding. They didn't want peace. They wanted control, but they weren't going to get it. This time, they lost. They just hadn't figured it out yet. After the cops left, I just stood there staring at the door for a while. It was snowing again. The kind of slow, heavy flakes that made everything feel quieter than it really was. Jamie had already gone upstairs, curled under his blankets with the little flashlight I'd slipped into his stocking. He hadn't asked about the police. He just knew. Knew that the whole thing, the dinner, the mockery, the shattered plate, the flashing lights outside our home, it was all part of something deeper, and it was finally over. Or at least I thought so. I expected silence, maybe some cold distance, but instead they doubled down. The next morning, Trish left me a 5-minute voice message. I didn't even bother playing it. Her name alone on the screen made my stomach turn. Then a text from my mom. So, this is the example you're setting for your son? I didn't answer. I just sat on the floor next to the couch watching the snow pile up outside the window. Something about that text was almost laughable. The example I'm setting, as if Jamie hadn't watched his cousin destroy his artwork, get applauded for it, and then get handed a puppy 3 days later. And yes, that happened. 3 days after Christmas, my mom sent a picture to our old family group chat. Caleb holding a puppy, grinning like the prince of the house. Gold bow around its neck. Caption read, "Santa came through after all." Audacity. They knew what they were doing. That photo wasn't for sharing joy. It was bait. A message. We're fine. He's fine. You're the problem. I didn't take it. I left the chat and deleted the number. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. On New Year's Day, I found something in my mailbox. Not a card, not a gift. A single sheet of lined paper folded twice. No envelope, just shoved in like an afterthought. I didn't have to open it to know whose handwriting it was. It was my dad's. I stood at the sink, coffee in one hand, and read, "I raised you better than this. You've embarrassed this family long enough. You are not welcome in this house until you apologize and make things right." That was all it said. No Happy New Year. No mention of Jamie. Just blame, control, and silence where love was supposed to be. I tossed it in the trash, then took it out, tore it into pieces, and tossed it again. But it wasn't me who found it first. Jamie did. I didn't even know until I saw him later that afternoon sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, holding the letter in his lap. He didn't look sad, just tired. He looked like someone who understood too much too early. He didn't ask me what it meant. He asked something else. He asked, "So, we're not their family anymore?" I didn't know how to answer that right away. I just sat down next to him and said the only thing I knew to be true. We're always family to each other. That's what matters now. That night, I packed a small bag for the two of us. I didn't tell Jamie where we were going. I just loaded up the car, left our phones in the kitchen drawer, and drove north. About 2 hours out, there's a tiny cabin rental I used to go to before I had Jamie. Nothing fancy, no TV, no Wi-Fi, just trees, a wood stove, and complete quiet. We stayed 2 nights. On the first morning, Jamie walked out onto the porch and just stood there staring at the snow. Said it felt like a different planet. I watched him from inside as he sat on the steps and started drawing, just sketching the trees, the frozen lake in the distance, the chipped red paint on the railing. The second night after dinner, he handed me something folded in half, a drawing. It was the two of us inside the cabin sitting near the fire. His details were perfect. The little blanket I'd thrown over the chair, the cocoa mugs on the windowsill, the tiny pine tree we found behind the cabin and stuck in a vase. At the bottom, he'd written one sentence in big block letters. "This is what family feels like." I didn't cry. I just folded it carefully, tucked it into the front pocket of my wallet, and held on to it like it was more valuable than anything I'd ever owned. The next morning, before we left, Jamie asked if we were ever going back to Grandma and Grandpa's house. I told him the truth. Not unless they change. He nodded, then went back to sketching the frozen trees. That was the moment I knew. I didn't need their approval, their invitations, their letters pretending to be ultimatums. I had what mattered, and I wasn't going to give it up for anything. The silence in January was louder than the chaos that came before it. No more calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive photos. For almost 2 weeks, it was like we didn't exist to them. And maybe that should have felt like relief, but it didn't. Not entirely. The house was peaceful. Sure, Jamie was back to drawing, sleeping well, laughing more. But there was this quiet ache in me, like a bruise I couldn't see, but kept pressing on anyway. It wasn't longing. It was unfinished business. There was something about the way it all ended. The police, the letter, the guilt games that made it feel like the door had slammed shut. But I hadn't actually locked it. And a part of me, a part one hated, still needed to try once more. Not for them, for me. I didn't want to carry this into the rest of the year. I didn't want to wonder 10 years from now if there was something else I could have done. So, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, I made a decision I never thought I'd make again. We drove to their house. Jamie didn't ask why. He just packed a few pencils in his sketchbook and got in the car. That was the thing about him. He always knew when something mattered more than I wanted to admit. It had snowed that morning. Not much, just enough to cover the sidewalks and turn the trees silver. Their driveway was half cleared, like someone had started shoveling but gave up halfway through. When I knocked, I expected hesitation, pause, maybe a look of surprise, but my mom opened the door like I was a neighbor dropping off a package. No hug, no hello, just a quiet, sharp, "Come in." We stepped inside. Everything looked the same. Same candles on the mantel, same photos on the wall, same heavy silence hanging in the air. My dad was in his recliner, glasses on, holding a book he clearly wasn't reading. He looked up at me, then back down. Trish wasn't there. For once, I was glad. I kept it short. I said I came because I didn't want to walk away from them wondering if I had done everything I could. That I wasn't there to fight. I was there to ask one question. Do you think what happened to Jamie was okay? My mom sat down slowly on the edge of the couch and sighed like she was already exhausted by me. Then she said, "Kids fight. That's what they do. Caleb didn't mean to hurt anyone. You just made a scene." Then she looked at Jamie sitting beside me with his sketchbook open in his lap and added, "We've always loved Jamie. You're the one keeping him away." I looked at my dad. He hadn't said a word, just kept pretending to read. So I tried again. I told them it wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It wasn't about the plate or even the drawing. It was about a pattern. A long, exhausting pattern of dismissing, ignoring, blaming. And this time it was aimed at Jamie, that crossed a line I couldn't let go of. My mom rolled her eyes and said, "You've always been sensitive, Gloria. You overreact. You always have." And that was it. That was the moment. That one sentence was all I needed to hear to know it hadn't been about Jamie at all. It never had been. This had always been the story. I overreact. I cause trouble. I make things uncomfortable. I turn peace into tension. That's what they believed. What they wanted to believe because it meant they never had to change. I stood up, told Jamie to grab his things, and then as I turned to leave, my dad finally spoke. Quiet, flat. "This is what happens when you raise a boy without a real man in the house." I froze for half a second. I thought I misheard, but Jamie heard it too. I felt him go still beside me. I didn't respond. I just looked him in the eyes long enough for him to look away. Then we walked out. No slamming the door, no parting shot, just silence. In the car, Jamie didn't say anything for most of the drive. I kept glancing over at him, waiting, worried. But when we pulled into our driveway, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "I don't think they know how to be sad for other people, only for themselves." It wasn't something I'd ever said to him, but somehow he saw it. That night, after dinner, he handed me a new drawing. A little boy and his mom walking down a snowy road, a tall house in the background with no lights on, and one sentence written in careful block letters across the top. "Some doors don't open the right way." I hung it on our fridge, not as a reminder of the pain, but as proof that my son sees what I see, that he understands more than they ever gave him credit for, and that the door I closed behind us that day is not one I'll ever try to open again. January passed and life kept going like it always does. The snow outside our windows began to melt in patches, dirty and uneven, like even winter was tired of holding on. Jamie settled back into school. I buried myself in work. We made breakfast together most mornings. Sometimes waffles, sometimes just toast and apples. And slowly the house began to feel normal again. But there was still something under the surface. Not anger, not sadness exactly, more like the echo of something that used to be loud and constant. Now just quiet, but not gone. That kind of silence doesn't fill itself overnight. We hadn't heard a single word from them since the day I walked out of their house with Jamie's hand in mine. Not a check-in, not a text, not even a backhanded guilt message. Nothing. It was strange. I had braced myself for another explosion, a new wave of blame, maybe even a surprise visit. But they chose something worse. They erased us. And for a while, that hollow space sat in me like a room no one ever entered, full of things I didn't want to touch but couldn't throw out. Then in early February, a number I didn't recognize showed up on my phone. Voicemail. It was Trish. Her voice was calm, like we hadn't just set fire to our family 3 weeks ago. She said she'd heard we were doing fine, whatever that meant, that Caleb missed Jamie, that maybe the kids could at least see each other for their sake. She said there's no reason to keep punishing everyone over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I didn't finish the message. I deleted it and blocked the number because the truth is Jamie doesn't miss Caleb. He misses having cousins who didn't treat him like a side character in his own story. He misses having a grandma who looked at his art like it mattered. He misses the version of family I told him we had. The version I tried to protect until it shattered on the floor with that plate. He doesn't talk about any of it much, but the way he draws says everything. Last week he handed me a new sketch. A row of houses at night, snow on the rooftops, all the windows dark except one. Ours, the one glowing gold from inside. I asked him why only ours had the lights on. He said, because that's the one where it's warm. I didn't cry. I just kissed the top of his head and taped the drawing to the fridge. That same night, I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand and found the old family photo from last Christmas. The one with all of us in matching sweaters, arms linked, smiles wide. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it back in face down. Not out of hate, not even pain, just clarity. Because I finally understand. I didn't lose a family. I lost a performance. The difference between what they showed the world and how they treated us when no one was watching. That gap was always there. I just kept stepping over it, hoping it would shrink. Hoping love would fill it in. But real love doesn't come with rules or conditions or police reports. Real love looks like standing by your child even when the room turns against you. It looks like walking away even when your hands shake. It looks like starting over with less noise, fewer people, but more truth. Now our home is quiet but full. There are no forced smiles, no fake invitations. Just me and Jamie learning what peace really sounds like. I don't know if they'll ever change. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My parents begged me, don't go to Hawaii. The mortgage is behind. So, I transferred $8,700. A week later, I found out from my uncle that my sister had secretly tagged everyone at a beach resort without me, writing, vacation without loser. So, I quietly did what they really didn't want me to do. I actually believed them. When my mom called, nearly hysterical, saying the mortgage was 2 months late and the bank was starting paperwork, I didn't even think to question it. She said they were drowning, that Dad's hours had been slashed, and that Lily wasn't handling it well. She said she cried every night, that they were afraid they'd lose the house. It all sounded desperate and real, and I believed it. I was exhausted. I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift and hadn't even kicked off my shoes. I sat there listening while staring at the takeout I couldn't afford. My mom said they needed exactly $8,700 to stop the foreclosure and keep the lights on. I asked her twice if this was really what it was for. She swore on everything, said they wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. Dad even got on the phone for 5 seconds just to say, "Thank you, honey. You're saving us." I wired the money the next morning. That was all I had saved. My Hawaii fund. I'd spent 2 years putting it together little by little. That trip was my light at the end of the tunnel. A week in Oahu alone. No responsibilities, no one needing anything from me. The plan was to leave in October. I had even bought a new suitcase, but they needed it more, right? So, I told myself it was okay, that family came first, that there'd be other trips. I went back to my routine: work, sleep, repeat. No mention from them about the money after the transfer. Not even a thank you. I figured they were overwhelmed. 6 days later, I was sorting laundry in the living room when I got a message from my Uncle Steve, the only relative I even halfway trust. It just said, "I figured you hadn't seen this. You should." It was a screenshot from Facebook, Lily's account, a private album that I was definitely not tagged in. It was photo after photo of them, my parents, Lily, her boyfriend, at a beachfront resort. Not just some cheap weekend trip either. We're talking about one of those high-end places with infinity pools and private cabanas. They were wearing leis, holding tropical drinks, showing off spa treatments and seafood dinners. In one of the photos, Lily had posted a group shot with the caption, "Vacation without loser." Everyone in the family was tagged. Aunts, cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone but me. I read it 5 times, thinking maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But it was. And they weren't even trying to hide it. That $8,700 didn't go to a mortgage. It went straight to a beachside suite and cocktails by the pool. I just sat there on the floor staring at the screen like an idiot. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned. Like my brain couldn't wrap itself around it. I remembered the phone call, the fake panic in their voices, the way they guilt me like I was their last hope. And now this. That word burned into me. Loser. It wasn't just a joke. It was targeted, deliberate. They thought it was funny. They thought I'd never find out. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even call them. I just sat in silence while something shifted inside me. They thought they got away with it. Thought I'd stay quiet like I always do. That I'd write it off as just family being family. But I'm done playing the nice one. I'm done letting them walk all over me. They took my vacation, so I'm gonna take something from them. After I saw the pictures, I didn't call, didn't text, didn't say a word. I just sat with it for a day and let it sink in. Let myself accept the truth that I didn't want to believe. Not just about the money or the trip, but about who they really were. They lied to my face. They looked me in the eye, begged, said they were desperate, that the house was slipping away. And the whole time they were just planning a tropical vacation. And not only did they lie, they laughed about it. Called me a loser. That wasn't just a caption. That was them telling me exactly what they thought of me. I had to sit with that, really feel it. And then I made a decision. They were going to pay for this. Not just emotionally, literally. The car was the obvious choice. A dark blue Honda Accord, barely 2 years old. Dad's pride and joy. He babied that thing like it was made of gold. Wiped it down every weekend. Bragged about how he got it below market value. The funny part, I had the spare key. They gave it to me last year when I had to pick them up from the airport at 3 a.m. and never asked for it back. I checked. It was parked in the driveway while they were off snorkeling and posting mojitos on Facebook. So I went and got it, took the bus across town, walked the last 5 blocks like I was out for a casual evening stroll, and slid into the driver's seat like I had every right to because I did. I didn't just drive it home. I filed for a new title. And the best part, my Uncle Steve helped. He's the only one in the family who sees them clearly. He came with me to the DMV, said if they want to report it stolen, they'll have to explain under oath where they really were when I supposedly stole it. He even laughed and said, "Let me know when you're ready to take the house next." 3 days later, they landed back home. I knew it the second my phone started blowing up. First it was, "Mom, where's the car?" Then, "Lily, tell me you didn't actually take Dad's car. WTF is wrong with you?" Then, "Dad, Amy, call me right now." I let them stew for hours. I wanted the panic to settle in. Let them feel powerless for once. When I finally picked up, it was like a dam broke. My mom started yelling so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She was shrieking about theft, betrayal. How could I do this to them? Like I hadn't just sacrificed my entire vacation savings to save their home. Then Dad jumped in. He was calmer, but worse in that passive-aggressive, guilt-tripping way, asking me how I could be so petty, telling me I misunderstood everything. That's when I cut in. I asked how the resort was, if the spa was worth stealing $8,700, if the champagne tasted extra sweet with a side of betrayal. They went quiet. Then I told them exactly what they didn't want to hear. I saw everything. I know you lied, and you're lucky all I took was the car. And I hung up. A few hours later, Lily posted one of those passive-aggressive Instagram stories with a black screen and white text. Something about fake people in the family and jealous losers who can't stand to see others happy. I screenshotted it and smiled. They still thought they had the upper hand. Still thought they could manipulate, twist it around, get sympathy from the rest of the family. What they didn't know is that I wasn't planning to stop with the car. They had secrets. I knew them. I just never used them before because I still had hope that they'd change. But now I was going to make sure they begged me to stop. And when they did, I wouldn't. After I hung up, they tried everything. Lily sent voice notes pretending to be calm, acting like she didn't understand why I was overreacting. My dad texted me a paragraph that started with, "We love you, but," and ended with some nonsense about how family is complicated. My mom doubled down with a phone call that I ignored, then followed it with, "You're hurting us more than you know, right?" I let them sit in it for 2 days. No response, no explanation. I didn't answer anything. I knew they were panicking because the car was real to them, tangible. Suddenly, this wasn't just some money I gave them that they pretended didn't exist. This was an actual loss they could feel. And that was just the beginning. I dug through my old messages, my email, even some of my mom's Facebook posts from years back. I started making a list. Every dirty little thing they'd done, not just to me, to other people in the family, too. Things I never brought up because I was the peacekeeper, the one who understood. Like the time they borrowed money from my cousin Mia and never paid her back. Lied and said it was for Lily's textbooks. Turned out it went to cover a gambling debt my dad had. Or how they guilt Aunt Sandra into signing over part of the inheritance from Grandpa, saying it was for emergency home repairs, then used it to buy a new backyard patio and throw Lily's boyfriend a birthday party. There were dozens of things like that. I never connected all the dots before, but now I had every receipt, every timestamp, every screenshot, and I wasn't going to waste them. I wrote a draft, a very calm, detailed post. Nothing dramatic, just facts, names, dates, numbers. I didn't even have to exaggerate anything. The truth was damning enough, but I didn't post it yet. I sent it privately. First to my mom, then to Lily, then to my dad. I added a message with it. "You stole my money. You lied. You laughed at me. You can apologize and make this right, or this goes out to Facebook, to Reddit, to everyone. You choose." 5 minutes. That's how long it took. Mom called me sobbing. Real sobs this time. The scared kind. She asked what I wanted. I told her I wanted them to admit it. All of it. And not just to me, publicly. I wanted them to go on Facebook where they made that little loser joke and tell the truth. She begged me not to. Said it would humiliate them. Said people wouldn't understand. I said, "I don't care." Lily, of course, sent some garbage response about how it was just a joke and that I was acting psychotic. She had the nerve to say I should have just talked to them like a normal person. I ignored her. Then I went a step further. I messaged my golden boy brother, Brian, the favorite, the one who never helps, never gives, but gets worshipped just for showing up. I sent him the screenshots, everything. Told him I was done protecting them. Told him if he didn't want to be part of the fallout, he better stay quiet. He didn't even reply. Good. They were cornered now and they knew it. I could feel the shift. No more fake guilt trips. No more gaslighting. Now it was just fear. The way they had made me feel for years, I was finally feeding it back to them. And I wasn't even close to done. I didn't expect them to apologize. Not really, but I thought at the very least they'd go quiet. Maybe try to settle things privately. Maybe let the embarrassment sink in and come to me like adults. Instead, they went in the exact opposite direction. The explosion happened in the extended family group chat. A threat I usually keep muted. Too many forwarded memes, prayer chains, and birthday gifts. But that day, I'm glad I checked. Out of nowhere, my mom dropped a message the size of a novel. She wrote that while they were away on a modest little break, I had snuck onto their property and stolen their only vehicle. She said I had become unstable, that I was paranoid and refusing to return it, and that they were in contact with legal counsel. She finished it off with a line that made my stomach turn. We love Amy deeply, but this kind of behavior is a cry for help. Please be patient with her. A cry for help. I laughed out loud, then actually stood up in the middle of my living room because I couldn't sit still. They weren't just lying. They were setting the stage. They were trying to make me look crazy, like I was mentally unraveling, unstable, so they could justify what they did and turn the rest of the family against me. I didn't even have time to reply before Uncle Steve beat me to it. Kathy, you sure you want to lie like that in a group chat? I've seen the receipts, including Lily's loser post. Then he dropped 3 screenshots into the chat. The first was the beach photo with all of them tagged. Everyone but me. The second was the caption, "Vacation without loser." The third was my bank transaction, the $8,700 transfer. My name, their account, clear as day. Silence. For 5 long minutes, nobody said anything. Then Aunt Mia replied, "Wait, is that where my $3,000 went last year? You told me it was for Lily's college tuition." Next came Aunt Sandra. "They did the same to me with Grandpa's inheritance. Told me it was for emergency home repairs. They bought a new grill and threw Lily's boyfriend a birthday party." Then Jenna, my cousin who never says anything in family chats, wrote, "They told me they paid off their mortgage last year. I asked for a loan in May and they said they couldn't help. Said they were broke." It unraveled like that. One message after another, people piecing things together, stories they'd never questioned until now. Things that didn't add up before suddenly made perfect sense. Lily left the group chat, just disappeared without a word. My mom sent a follow-up message 5 minutes later. "We didn't mean to upset anyone. There are a lot of misunderstandings happening. We'll resolve this with Amy privately." But it was too late. The dam had burst. My inbox lit up with messages from cousins, aunts, even a couple of second cousins I barely knew. One of them, Daniel, said he'd always had a weird feeling about how they treated me. Another said she remembered them calling me selfish behind my back because I wouldn't pay for Lily's trip to Florida in 2021. That was the trip they said Lily needed for mental health. They forgot to mention she brought her boyfriend and posted beach pics all over Instagram. And then the biggest surprise came from Brian. Golden boy Brian, the one they worshipped, the one they protected like a god. He messaged me directly. "They told me you donated the money. Said you decided not to go to Hawaii. They said you didn't want to travel anymore." I had no idea. Holy shit. He actually sounded stunned, and I believed him because that's when I realized they hadn't just used me. They'd lied to everyone over and over. So much so consistently that even Brian, their golden child, was just another puppet. I asked him one question. "Do you believe me now?" He responded a minute later. "Yeah, I do. I'm sorry." I sat there staring at the screen, not sure how to feel. For once, Brian wasn't defending them. He wasn't playing neutral or brushing it under the rug. He was on my side. That's when I knew I had them. They tried to discredit me, tried to make me look unstable, tried to flip the narrative before I could speak. But it was too late. Now everyone had seen it, and I still hadn't posted anything public yet. The best was still to come. I waited a week. I watched the dust settle, let them twist and turn while the family chat went dead quiet, and their allies started dropping off like flies. Not a single apology, not even an attempt, just silence. The kind you can feel. The kind that's more insulting than if they just told me to go to hell. They were hoping I'd move on, that I'd get tired, that I'd let it go like I always used to. But they didn't understand. This time was different. This time I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I wanted war, so I gave them one last chance. I sent one final message to our family group chat. Not to ask for anything, not to explain, just to make it clear. You had a week to come clean. You chose silence. I won't. No one replied. Not even Brian. So I did it. I posted the full story, not vague, not anonymous, not a passive-aggressive quote with a sad background. I posted everything in detail with dates, screenshots, and side-by-side photos of their beach vacation and my bank transfer. I told the whole story from the phone call where they begged me for help to the photos I wasn't supposed to see to the caption that broke me. Vacation without loser. I explained how I gave up my Hawaii trip to help save their house, how they used the money for a beachfront resort and then mocked me behind my back like I was a joke. And I didn't stop there. I added the other pieces. How they'd lied to Mia about tuition, to Sandra about repairs, to Jenna about their finances. I showed the pattern. I named the names, not in a cruel way, just facts, calm, cold, factual, because the truth doesn't need embellishment when it's this ugly. Then I hit post. First, nothing. Then within 15 minutes, the shares started, then the comments, then the messages. My inbox lit up like a Christmas tree. People I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me, coworkers, old classmates, extended relatives. A few said they were sorry for believing things my family had said about me. A couple told me they'd gone through the same thing with their own parents or siblings, but most people were just angry for me. And then the comments on the post started getting brutal. Someone reposted Lily's loser caption with the caption, "Imagine stealing from your own sister and being proud of it." Another person, a friend of my cousin, commented, "This family sounds like a discount cult. Get out and never look back." I didn't respond to any of it. I just watched. The reach kept growing. Shares, reposts, even someone tagging a Reddit thread asking if they could use the story there. By evening, the message was clear. No one was on their side anymore. Lily disappeared from every platform, not just deactivated, gone, deleted. My mom made her account private. My dad, who used to post jokes and dad memes like clockwork, didn't log in for 3 days straight. Then Brian called. I ignored it twice, picked up the third time. He didn't even say hello. He just said, "You really went scorched earth, huh?" I didn't say anything. He sighed and told me they were falling apart. That mom hadn't eaten in 2 days. That dad wanted to sue me but didn't know for what. That grandma called him crying, demanding to know what was true. Then he said something that actually surprised me. "They're not going to say sorry, Amy. They still don't think they did anything wrong. They think you're just being dramatic." I let that sit for a second. Then I asked, "And what do you think?" Another pause. "I think they've been doing this for years and you finally blew it open. I don't blame you." I asked him if he ever knew about the Hawaii money. He said no. They told him I changed my mind and wanted to donate the money to the family because I was over the whole travel thing. They said I was growing up. I laughed when he said that. Then he did too. For a second, it almost felt normal between us, but it wasn't. I told him I sold the car. He didn't react, just asked how much I got. I told him 10,000 flat. After the title work and fees, I came out ahead by $1,500. He said, "Good, you deserved it." Then he hung up. Later that night, my mom messaged me a long rambling apology. Except it wasn't an apology. It was her trying to spin it all again. How I humiliated them. How I misunderstood the intention. How it wasn't supposed to be like this. But she still didn't say sorry. So I left her on read. I took screenshots of everything just in case. And then I blocked them one by one. The only one I didn't block was Brian. Blocking them felt too easy, almost too quiet for everything they put me through. But I didn't do it to punish them. Not exactly. I did it because I didn't need to hear one more lie. No more twisting the truth. No more fake guilt trips disguised as concern. No more, "You misunderstood." I didn't want their voices in my head anymore. But of course, silence from people like them never lasts. 3 days later, Brian showed up. He texted me once, "In the area. Got time?" And 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't surprised. I almost respected the move. Sending the one person I hadn't cut off, the golden sun, the neutral party. I let him in. He had that look like he hadn't slept in days. Coffee in his hand, but it didn't seem like it helped. He started slow, asked if I was okay, told me the family was pretty shaken up, that Lily hadn't left her room, that Dad almost got written up at work because someone printed the vacation without loser photo and taped it to his locker, that Mom hadn't shown her face at church in a week. And then he got to the real reason he was there. They wanted me to give the money from the car back. Brian tried to frame it like it wasn't about the car. Said it was about closure, about repairing trust. Said the Facebook post humiliated them, that I'd gone too far. That they were afraid of what I'd do next. I asked him flat out if they finally admitted what they did. He looked me in the eye and said, "No, they still think it wasn't that bad." That's when it clicked. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Not sorry for what they did, only sorry it backfired. I told Brian I wasn't giving back a cent. That car was compensation. That post, that was restraint. I reminded him they lied to everyone, not just me. That they begged me for money they claimed was for the mortgage, mocked me publicly, and then tried to spin it like I was unstable. He didn't argue. He just sat there quietly like he didn't know what side to be on anymore. So, I told him one last thing. I told him I had a notebook, not just a mental record, an actual physical notebook. Years of notes, screenshots, dates. Every time they took something from me or someone else in the family. Every time they lied, manipulated, twisted stories, begged for emergencies that turned out to be parties or gifts or vacations. Every guilt trip, every scam, every cover-up. I scanned the whole thing months ago, backed it up to the cloud. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "If they come after me again, legally, publicly, financially, I will release it. Facebook, Reddit, family emails everywhere. I will light the whole thing on fire and let everyone watch." He didn't even flinch. He just nodded slowly and said, "I believe you." Then he stood up, and before he walked out the door, he said something I'll never forget. "They're scared of you now, just so you know." I didn't say anything because that was the point. I sold the car that weekend. 10,000 flat, clean title, no haggling. I walked away with $1,500 more than I gave them. That money went straight into a new travel fund. Not just Hawaii, better, longer. I upgraded everything. Nicer Airbnb, direct flights, a volcano tour, the whole thing. And I booked it the same day I got the transfer. Leaving in October, alone. No one knows. No family posts, no announcements, just me. And for the first time in years, the silence feels good. Not awkward, not painful, peaceful, plain. They tried to humiliate me, tried to gaslight me, tried to make me feel crazy. Now they're the ones whispering in group chats, hiding their profiles, dodging questions at church. I don't have to do anything else. They ruined themselves. I don't feel guilty. I don't feel sorry. They used me, mocked me, laughed at me behind my back. Now they'll remember my name every time someone asks what happened to the car. Every time someone brings up that Facebook post, every time a new relative suddenly stops responding to their messages. I'm not the loser. I was the escape plan, and they just lost the best thing they ever had. The first update. It's been a few weeks since I sold the car and booked the trip. I leave in October, and every time I check the countdown app on my phone, I smile. I haven't heard from my parents. Not a word. Lily's still gone from social media. Dad's account looks like it was wiped clean. And Mom's locked down just how I like it. But yesterday I got a letter in the mail, a real one, handwritten, from my grandma. We haven't talked in a while. She always stayed out of drama. Said it wasn't her place. She's old school like that. But inside the envelope was one page of careful cursive, and it started with, "I want you to know I read everything." She didn't take sides, didn't scold me, didn't beg me to make peace. She just said she saw the post, saw the screenshots, and that she was sorry I had to go through it. Said she never realized how much I'd been carrying. Said she understood now. Then she wrote something that almost made me cry. "You deserve that vacation, and you deserve peace, even if it means peace without us." That was it. No guilt, no manipulation, just quiet support. I folded the letter and put it in my travel journal. She gets it. And honestly, that's it. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.